Chapter 17. Pride was very gloomy today. Not only did he have to endure his family's nagging, but they actually sent 5 starships to escort him and a large group of people to protect him after he disembarked from the starship. In the end, they were intercepted at the passage. Pride gritted his teeth in anger when he recalled the people at the space stations. TSK, what a child, he actually brought so many nannies with him, gazes. He had finally shaken off those people outside with much difficulty, and now he ran into such a situation the moment he entered the cabin. Pride walked over angrily and sat down. He did not even look at Kong Man beside him. After glaring at Alan, he turned on the display and adjusted his view to see if the starships his family had sent to escort had left or not. Pride had an unapproachable attitude. Everyone could see that, but there were people who just ignored his attitude. Gee Pride, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Alan Shev, and I'm also a student of 7 Lights this term. You can say that we're classmates. Alan extended his hand in greeting and smiled very happily. Pride did not even raise his eyes as he said in a very angry tone, I don't care which onion you are. But Alan did not feel the slightest bit self-conscious about being called an onion. His automatic filtering of words and shamelessness as he moved forward really made Silen gasp in amazement. He had heard from Diaz that there were a lot of weirdos in the higher education institutions here, and he had truly learned something today. I've watched your fighter combat videos often. You're amazing. You can even perform such super maneuvers. Although Pride still did not raise his head due to Alan's eloquent praise, Silen noticed that the corner of the kid's mouth had widened a little. Then, he tried his best to maintain his previous serious demeanor. However, his ears were perked up. Silen felt that if Pride had a tail, it would definitely be sticking up to the sky. Otherwise, Alan would not have the slightest intention of stopping him even though he had been blabbering on for a long time. He's a pretty awkward kid. This was Silen's conclusion for Pride. Kong Man let out a soft snort before staring at the display in front of him again. There was no telling if the snort was directed at Alan or Pride. Pride was probably immersed in Alan's praise and did not notice Kong Man's snort. In addition, several people sitting around them had also been paying attention to them. After hearing Lan's words, they also joined the conversation. Pride raised his chin at the praises from the people around him. I learned those things a long time ago. If Kong Man's arrogance was hidden inside, then Pride's arrogance was more obvious than ever. That being said, Pride did have the capital to be proud of himself. Setting aside factors like identity and background, if Kong Man of the twin stars of 7 Lights leaned towards theoretical research, then Pride would lean towards actual combat. His fighter piloting skills were top-notch among his peers, not to mention that he was also outstanding in shooting, mech piloting and so on. Alan was very regretful that photography equipment was not allowed in this place. Otherwise, he would definitely take a photo with these 2 7 Lights twin stars. He would definitely be able to surprise his old man. Although Alan had also mentioned the other person from the twin stars of 7 Lights, Kong Man, it was obvious that the people around him did not have much interest in this genius of ordinary birth. Part of the reason they came to 7 Lights was because this place provided a platform for the descendants of some great families and forces to make more friends and pave the way for their future lives. These young people who spoke with a golden spoon in their mouths obviously did not include Kong Man in their social circle, even if Kong Man was one of the twin stars of 7 Lights. Moreover, Kong Man was biased towards academics. This was even less of a common topic for these young people. Of course, Alan was an exception. Kong Man did not show too much emotion towards the other's deliberate disregard. He seemed to be used to it. Can you tell me about the electromagnetic code that Alan mentioned just now? The electromagnetic code has a magnetic field that can be adjusted, right? According to the formula, how do you ensure that the magnetic field and other factors at the location will not interfere with it? Silen was a little interested in the electromagnetic code that Kong Man researched. He had mentioned this question when he was discussing with Yudi, but they did not discuss it in depth. Now, it had piqued Silen's curiosity. Kong Man stared at Silen in astonishment. A person who was able to accurately recite the few quoted formulas must have a certain level of understanding in this area. That was why Kong Man did not give Sillin the cold shoulder. He turned off the display and pressed another button on the armrest. He took out an electronic writing board inside and slowly explained it to Sillin. The duo talked from the most basic sonic code to the optical code to the electromagnetic code. Sillin had even written down a few simplified formulas that he had discussed with Yudi. This caused Kong Man to look at Sillin in a new light. Moreover, Kong Man grew even more excited when they talked about academic research. Kong Man had a completely different attitude towards people with real talent and knowledge. Pride's attention had also shifted towards Sillin and Kong Man's discussion. Although his eyes were still staring at the screen in front of him, his heart was actually elsewhere. Even if he did not understand the things that Kong Man was talking about, he could more or less understand some of it. Alan, who was chatting enthusiastically with the people around him, caught a glimpse of Sillin and Kong Man, whispering to each other from the corner of his eyes. He glanced towards them, and when he saw the formulas on the writing board in Kong Man's hands, his gaze towards Sillin was filled with admiration. Formulas and whatnot were practically gibberish heavenly books to Alan. After the transport had landed on planet Seven Lights, according to the newcomer's guide in the Seven Lights Handbook, they must apply for a Planet Seven Lights One Pass card. This was because Seven Lights exclusive card was required to buy things, ride on a bus and so on. External debit cards and whatnot were completely useless once they were out of this port. After he had applied for a Seven Lights card with his proof of identity and admission notice, Sillin then transferred the amount on the card Aflon had given him to his Seven Lights card. Since he was a new student, the Seven Lights card Sillin had applied for was Crimson Red. After he had officially entered the school, he could apply to upgrade his Seven Lights card if his credits and GPA reached a certain target. The Seven Lights card was divided into 7 ranks: Crimson, Orange, Yellow, Green, Cyan, Blue and Purple. Different ranks had different privileges on Planet Seven Lights, and they would have to rely on themselves if they wanted to upgrade their card. Seven Lights was a relatively independent place. It was not just Seven Lights. Some of the higher education institutions at Sector B and the military academies at Sector C also had a similar system. Kong Man was going to visit an old professor, and he had wanted to bring Sillin along at first. The old professor was quite fond of people who were involved in academics, but Sillin rejected him. He had his own plans, and he was not a pure academic researcher. After rejecting Alan's invitation to report together, Sillin walked out of the port with a travel bag that did not carry much on his back. The moment he came out, he saw 2 high-end flying cars waiting for him at the entrance. Pride walked over with his chin raised, tossed the small bag in his hand to one of them and entered the flying car. He didn't expect this kid's background to be so deep that he could enjoy privileges openly even in Seven Lights. No wonder those people were fawning over Pride back in the cabin. Although none of them had explicitly stated Pride's identity, they probably already had an idea in their hearts when Alan told them a few things about Pride. Sillin turned his head away and no longer cared about those things. He went to a store that sold communication equipment near the port and bought a bracelet communicator. Planet Seven Lights had its own specialized communication network system and signal receiving equipment. Therefore, the communication equipment brought from outside the planet could not be used here, and he had to buy it elsewhere. Sillin did not plan to report immediately. The report would last for another 6 or 7 days anyway. According to a hunter's habits, Sillin would first personally visit a few important places on Planet Seven Lights, buy a map of the planet, and then step onto the Maglev Global Train. Chapter 18. As a renowned higher education institution in the galaxy, Seven Lights University was incomparable to the schools in the 10 trade sectors, be it the layout of the underground space or the allocation of resources and facilities. Here, there was a tightly guarded research and technology zone, a wide outdoor training zone, a city that never sleeps for leisure and entertainment, a trade zone with numerous categories. It had everything, and it was like a complete system. The closest to the port was the school zone, and right next to the school zone was a large residential area. There were clusters of tall buildings and villas. According to the 7 Lights Handbook, the students' dormitories were allocated by the university, and not chosen by the students themselves. Of course, there were also a lot of high-end residential and office buildings available for rent on the planet. Whether or not one could rent those buildings depended on one's ability. Money was still a small matter, but the important thing was the restriction of one's 7 Lights card. Don't even think about renting those buildings unless your 7 Lights card has been upgraded to a certain level. The school zone was the center of the planet, and the entertainment zone, training zone, trade zone, and so on were distributed around it. Silen did not go to the school zone to take a look. He would report to the school zone directly after he was done strolling around the planet. Therefore, according to the marking on the map, the first big stop of the global train was the trade zone. Perhaps because it wasn't rush hour right now, there weren't many people scattered around on the train. Some of them were sleeping on their seats with their eyes closed. Judging from the badges on their chests, they were all 3rd and 4th grade students. 7 Lights was divided into 7 grades according to the level of education. 1st to 4th grade were compulsory grades here, and only after 4th grade could one apply to graduate. Of course, if one was interested and had good enough grades, they could also choose to further their studies. In 7 Lights, those who continued their studies enjoyed very generous treatment. The reason there weren't any 5th to 7th grade students on the train was because 7 Lights had provided them with a special car. It was much more convenient than taking the train or taxi. When Silen was chatting with Kong Man on the transport, he learned that Kong Man had chosen the 4+3 model, or the integration model for further studies. This model was only targeted at specially recruited students, and the treatment they enjoyed was different from the others. The 7 Lights card Silen and the others had applied for was the most basic red rank, but Kong Man's was orange rank, 1 rank higher, and his promotion was slightly easier than the others. Hearing the train station announcement, Silen carried his backpack and got off the train. The moment he got out of the car, Silen had the illusion that he was somewhere else. Although he had already read about the introduction of the trade zone in the 7 Lights Handbook, the feeling was much stronger when he saw it in person. This place was like a huge business empire. The trade district in front of him seemed to be formed by a complex crisscrossing of bustling commercial streets. There were flying cars hurrying in the air and people chatting. Was this really just an academy? Why was it so similar to the bustling commercial streets he saw when he went to Sector D to look for Aflon? Flashing road signs and billboards guided the people who came here. From time to time, a large light screen would appear in the air with advertisements. A person with a 5th-year badge was holding a device in his hand and introducing its functions. Such advertisements could be seen everywhere, and there were many kinds of them, from the most basic daily necessities to hoverboards and flying scooters. There were all kinds of them, and the gorgeous images were so flashing that people couldn't take their eyes off them. Silen swept a casual glance at the shops on both sides of the street and knew that none of these things were ordinary goods. Otherwise, no one would have the nerve to take them out in this commercial street filled with high-end goods. Although Silen had some savings in his card right now, he really couldn't buy many things with just a glance. Thankfully, some of these things weren't in use right now. Silen came to a department store and bought the daily necessities he needed. Then, he strolled into a grocery street. Although they were all grocery stores and did not have a proper entrance, the people who set up stalls here were all 2nd to 4th-year students. The things they put on display were part of the spoils of war they had obtained during their internship outside the planet or during some course examinations. Some of the things were small and exquisite, and they were placed inside the dormitory purely for decoration. They might be miscellaneous, but they were just for the sake of novelty. But there was no lack of good stuff. There were even some precious metal blocks, energy blocks, and so on. If these things were to be sold in a big store, they would have to pay a commission fee, so many people handled them themselves. Hey, look, this is a big conch we got from Planet Aquamarine last month. When the wind blows, you can even hear the sound of the waves. Look at this color, Junior, you have a good eye. This is a type of alloy ore we dug during our internship. Our mentor said that the ratio of several important metals that make up this alloy ore is almost perfect. It has an important role in the construction and repair of weapons, as well as the modification of parts for armored battleships. Looking around, the people setting up the stalls were of different shapes and sizes. Some of them might be setting up a stall for the first time and were not open yet, but some were obviously old foxes. The vigor of their shouts and their glib words were almost the same as those old peddlers. The girls with nimble hands made some simple processing of the materials in their hands, and they looked really good. At the very least, there were 3 times more people squatting in front of the pretty girl's stall than the other stalls. The effect of the pretty girl effect was undeniable. When Silen was looking at something at a stall, a person suddenly appeared in front of the stall next to him. He looked to be about the same age as Silen. His hair was a little messy, and he was wearing a singlet, baggy floral shorts, and a pair of rattan woven slippers. He was waving a leaf fan in his hand. Silen had seen that fan in front of a stall that specialized in selling leaf products. This person squatted down in front of the stall, waving the fan with one hand and fiddling with the small items on the stall with the other. He seemed to be looking at the raw materials of these items or checking if they were in good condition. However, Silen noticed that the expression of the stall owner behind him changed a few times when he saw this person. He opened his mouth but did not say anything. Silen felt that at that moment, the stall owner had the urge to pack up and run away. This piqued Silen's curiosity. He stood at the side and watched quietly. The stall owner beside him did not change much. He enthusiastically explained the raw materials and sources of these items to that person. Then, it was an extremely tragic haggling process. Silen watched as the pitiful stall owner's eyes slowly turned from a happy upper arc to a sad lower arc. He couldn't even get angry anymore and said, "Never mind, Junior. Since you're a new student, I'll give this to you as a greeting gift from a senior." I don't even know you. Why the hell should I accept a greeting gift from you? Besides, I'll feel guilty if you don't accept some money. Conscience. Do you even have that thing? From 500 galactic coins all the way down to 50 galactic coins, the stall owner was almost in tears. He wanted to give something to this guy and let him walk away, but he refused to do so. The person raised his hand and fished out a stack of 1,000 galactic coins from his pocket. He frowned and fished out a 7 Lights savings card and a couple of VIP cards from luxury stores at the center of the trade zone. After rummaging through his pockets for a long while, he finally fished out a $50 bill from a certain corner. "Here, 50. I'm not taking advantage of you." The person smiled in a rather harmless manner. The stall owner's face looked like he had been constipated for a long time. Even Silen felt conflicted on his behalf. That stack of 1,000 galactic coins was definitely not less than 20,000, was it? And those cards were impossible to get without spending at least a few million. He actually squatted down here and haggled like a small family. He cut it all the way down to 50, and even put on a, "See, I'm a good person," look. Silen felt that if he was that stall owner, he would have given this bastard a good kick. Watching the person's back as he left, the poor stall owner raised a trembling finger and pointed at the hateful back, unable to utter a single word for a long time. Silen listened as the stall owner he stopped at patted the trembling person and comforted him, "Don't mind him. That person has that kind of bad taste. You're not the only one who suffered. That bastard, who is he?" "Sigh, I accidentally heard it from a teacher yesterday. I have the urge to bang my head against the wall after knowing the truth. I beg for the truth. His name is Andrira Lung. This surname is very familiar." The poor stall owner frowned again and again. Then, his eyes abruptly widened. "The Andrira family, is that family known as so poor that they only have money?" "Yes." The sound of impact. Silen shook his head with a smile and left. The Andrira family was even more famous than the Duance family in the galaxy. In terms of wealth, the Duance family was not much weaker. However, the reason why the Andrira family was so famous was because the head of the Andrira family once complained about being poor at a certain old general's birthday banquet. Then, the old general joked, "Yeah, you're poor. So poor that you only have money left. And so, this so poor that they only have money family spread throughout the galaxy. Chapter 19. The items sold at these stalls were not bad, but they were not very practical. In fact, those who really wanted to buy practical items would not come here. The people who came here were purely looking for novelty. If the seniors were to get their hands on some new toys they had never seen before and sell them here, many people would still be willing to buy them at a high price. As he continued forward, a stall selling plants attracted Silen's attention. Following Jenya's education, Silen would always plant some green plants at the places he lived. There were more flowers and plants on the stalls. Some were specially planted by flower lovers, and some were seeds and branches they collected when they went for training and internships outside the planet. The plants on display were all things Silen had seen in books before, but he could not make out all the seeds. After a brief observation, Silen took a fancy to a green vine sealed with ecological film and nutrient solution. It was labeled as big-legged Boston creeper. Compared to normal Boston creeper, the big-legged Boston creeper's climbing ability was stronger, and its radiation resistance and drought resistance were more than 10 times higher than normal Boston creepers. Silen looked at it. It was priced at 8,000 galactic credits. So expensive. The stall owner was a third-year student. When he saw Silen frown, he explained, "Junior, don't be fooled by the high price, but it's definitely worth it. This big-legged Boston creeper is not the species you've seen before. We discovered this vine by chance when we were undergoing training outside the planet. Because we were pressed for time at the time, we didn't manage to get much. It's not just on planet 7 Lights, it's rare even in the entire galaxy." The stall owner spoke mysteriously and handed Silen an infrared fluoroscopic device. Then, he placed the vine in front of him. Silen was surprised when he saw the image on the fluoroscopic device. The image around the vine was very blurry, and he could barely see the face of the stall owner behind the vine. "Do you understand now?" The stall owner was very proud. "This thing is definitely worth it. If we can plant this vine and let it cover the walls around the dormitory, it will be hard for people outside the dormitory to peep in. It's super effective against night vision binoculars and whatnot." Before Silen could express his opinion, a voice interrupted. "I saw this thing at the 7 Lights Research Zone's Botany Research Institute yesterday. I heard that this thing can only live for 10 days at most after it leaves its main body. Come to think of it, this should be the 8th day, right? Andriera Lung." Seeing that it was this guy, Silen didn't say much. He just looked at the stall owner sympathetically. "Ahem, that's not entirely true. If it's sealed in a biological membrane and nutrient solution, it can still be preserved for more than 10 days. The stall owner was a little embarrassed by Lung's words. He didn't expect that there would be someone who knew someone from the Institute of Botany. Lung didn't even raise his head as he looked at the rattan in his hand. "I heard that the 50 or so samples used for research at the Research Institute are all dead. There are still a dozen or so that they can't bear to use, so they're also stored in this method. A few professors have gone to search for the parent. Perhaps in a few days, they'll be able to obtain a large batch." 5 minutes later. The stall owner looked like he wanted to cry as he received the 80 star coins from Silen. The way he looked at Lung was as if he wanted to avoid him as far as possible. As expected of someone from the "so poor that all is left is money" family. Silen thought. "How about it? I've helped you bargain down so much. Do I get any reward?" Lung waved that leaf fan and looked at Silen with a grin. Silen didn't beat around the bush. "Tell me your request." The people from the Andriera family definitely wouldn't be a goody two-shoes. They wouldn't do useless work, and they wouldn't do unprofitable business. That was why Silen directly let Lung bring it up. As long as it was within an acceptable range, everything was negotiable. "All right, a straightforward person. As for the reward, if you can grow this rattan, you'll have the priority to sell me the planting method." "You're so sure that I can grow it?" "Even the people from the Institute of Botany couldn't do it, so why would I be able to?" Besides, just like what the stall owner said, I'm buying this thing purely as a souvenir and for fun. As for the reason. Andrira's intuition. Lung said in an extremely cocky manner. All right. Silen said with a smile. He waved his hand and left the grocery street. Silen thought that buying a hoverboard would make it more convenient for him to move around in the future. After all, the school district was also very big. A hoverboard was much cheaper than a flying car. It looked like a skateboard, but it could also be equipped with a manual control rudder. Moreover, it could also be used for physical exercise. If one wanted to save energy, they would have to ride the hoverboard themselves. Before going to buy a hoverboard, Silen passed by a bookstore. The storefront was very big, and it looked simple and unadorned. It had a bit of history. The store was currently holding an event, the bookstore's 7th centennial celebration. Silen couldn't do anything about the membership benefits, but he could participate in the quiz event that was open to everyone. The sources of the questions were all public. They were from those few books. If all of them were correct, apart from a reward of 10,000 star coins, they could also choose any 10 books from the bookstore for free, and a VIP membership card. Those who were 90 to 50% correct would also have corresponding rewards. As for those who couldn't even get 50% correct, it wasn't like they didn't have anything at all. At the very least, they would have a discount coupon. It wasn't like he had to pay anything, so it was fine to participate. Also, Silen had read those books before. There were a lot of people participating. There were a lot of participants, and after swiping his 7 lights card for verification, the shop assistant arranged an answer panel for Silen. Almost all of them were multiple-choice questions, but nearly 20% of the questions were very detailed. For example, a certain sentence came from which book, which volume, which chapter, who said it, which year of a certain battle took place, and even the molecular formula of a certain drug. Fortunately, Silen's memory was extraordinary. It didn't take him long to answer all 100 questions, and the system immediately marked them after he submitted them. 100 points. Congratulations, you've won the first prize. Following the instructions on the panel, Silen submitted his results and the answer panel to the relevant person in charge of the store, and then someone brought him to the prize area. At the same time, a message appeared on the big screen inside the shop. Congratulations, Silen Duance, for winning the first prize in the quiz. The people who saw this message couldn't help but sigh. He actually got full marks for such crazy questions. What an amazing person. Duance? A member of the Duance family? This seems to be the second full marks prize today, isn't it? Speaking of which, who's the full marks prize from before? I think it's called CI something. Silen had no idea what the people outside were talking about him. Right now he was busy receiving his prize. After transferring 10,000 galactic coins to his 7 lights card, Silen went to the display area to choose his books. Some limited edition books weren't something that could be found anywhere. The premium display area wasn't open to the public today, but it was an exception for those who had won certain prizes. When he arrived at the display area, Silen discovered that there was another person who had come to receive the full marks prize and choose his book. The person looked about the same age as Silen, and he had a slightly refined and scholarly air about him. He stood in front of a bookshelf and flipped through a book quietly. Look, Jincheng. There's actually someone else who got full marks other than you. The person who brought Silen to choose his book greeted the person with a smile. Oh. The person's gaze moved from the book in his hand to Silen, and with a gentle and refined smile, he said, "That's a rare sight." He had no intention of coming over. Silen returned a polite greeting and began flipping through the books on the bookshelf. A while later. Hey, Jincheng. Don't you think there's something wrong with that guy? The person who brought Silen over moved next to C.I. Jincheng and said in a low voice. C.I. Jincheng's gaze moved away from the book once more and looked at Silen not far away. The more he looked, the more he frowned. It's too fast. The pages are turning too fast. The next page followed almost at the same time his gaze landed on the first page. This wasn't an electronic book, so the speed at which the pages were flipped was not something the duo could ignore. Jincheng, do you think that guy is really paying attention? Or is he just putting on an act? He's been flipping pages for several books already. Who is he? The information displayed on the card when the money was transferred is, Silan Duance. He's a new student of 7 Lights this term just like you. He's not a special recruit. He's a self-funded student. The Duance family? C.I. Jincheng was certain that he remembered every Duance family member that was even slightly famous, but he had never heard of this Silan. Chapter 20. Silan was immersed in the book and copied all the information into his brain. He didn't care about the gazes of the other 2 people in the display area at all. As long as there was no danger, Silan would not come out of that state. After flipping through the books on the shelf that he felt were more useful, Silan chose 10 of them. When he turned around, he saw that the other 2 people were looking at him strangely. After Silan nodded at the 2 with a smile, he said to the shop assistant, "I'll take these 10. Oh. Ow. Alright, please wait a moment." It was only then that the shop assistant came back to his senses. He scanned and demagnetized the 10 books Silan had chosen and marked them with the words, "Bookstore Celebration Quiz First Prize," before passing them back to Silan. "Please collect your VIP membership card at the main service counter." "Alright, thank you." After Silan left, the shop assistant was still a little incredulous. Jincheng, did he really finish reading? He should have memorized the books he read. Is he even human? Although I've heard that there are people with photographic memories, it's creepy to hear someone scanning like a machine like this. The shop assistant even shuddered as he spoke. There are crouching tigers and hidden dragons among the new students this year. C.I. Jincheng closed the book and put it back on the shelf. I'm leaving too. I'll come back when I have time after the registration. The new batch of books will arrive in 2 days. Someone will contact you guys. Alright, I'll let the store manager know. I've already submitted my graduation application, I believe we'll get a reply soon. When the time comes, I'll leave the arrangements to you. C.I. Jincheng made a, "Don't worry," gesture and left the display area as well. The 10 books Silan had chosen were all large hardcover books. He couldn't just casually put these 10 books into his subspace here. He couldn't take the risk of exposing the secret of the ring, but it was too strenuous to carry them on his back either. Therefore, Silan took care of the books and contacted someone in the store to send them over after he was done with the registration. Because Silan was the winner of the quiz first prize, the store didn't charge him extra for taking care of the books. Silan was stopped as soon as he walked out of the bookstore. "Duance Silan, please wait." C.I. Jincheng held a book in his hand as he strode forward quickly. "What is it?" "I just want to remind you that the winners will be shown on the big screen in the shop. Although there are no images, people will still pay attention to them. It's common for seniors to bully freshmen here, but if you can't find concrete evidence, the security team won't do much." Hearing this, Silan smiled. "Thank you for the reminder. May I ask who you are?" "My name is C.I. Jincheng, and I'm also a new student this term. However, I'm pretty familiar with 7 Lights University, so feel free to ask if you need any help." Silan thinks for a moment and said, "Do you know anything about the trade zone? Do you know which hoverboards are more affordable?" Since C.I. Jincheng had shown his good intentions, Silan did not refuse. After all, in this new and complicated environment, one more friend meant one more help. "I know a good hoverboard shop. It's the new student season right now, so there should be a lot of special offers. However, the quality is pretty good. I've bought one there before." C.I. Jincheng brought Silan to the shop, and the flashing screen at the entrance showed the hoverboards on sale. Silan looked at the real thing. It was not bad, and it was very affordable. Moreover, it came with 2 coupons for the open-air tea restaurant at the top floor of the commercial building. In order to express his gratitude towards Ci Jincheng, Silin used the 2 complimentary tea restaurant coupons straight away. There were many round or square tables of different sizes placed on the top floor of the commercial building, and there was even a large parasol on top of them. People in groups of 3 to 5 took the elevator to the top floor after they were done shopping in the commercial building and ate snacks. It wasn't rush hour right now, so there were a few empty tables. Silin and Ci Jincheng sat there drinking tea and chatting about 7 lights in passing. However, 8 people surrounded them not long after they sat down. "Yo, so you guys are here. How disloyal. You didn't even invite us when you came up for tea." One of them greeted them warmly. They looked like they were very close brothers. Silin and Ci Jincheng exchanged a look with each other. Trouble was coming. The 8 of them surrounded the small table. The person who greeted them pulled a chair over and sat beside the 2 of them. He grabbed a piece of dessert and placed it in his mouth. "I heard that the 2 of you just got some money. To be able to answer those perverted questions correctly, you're really good kids who love to learn." That was what he said, but there was obvious mockery in the person's eyes. To people like them, anyone who could answer those questions correctly was a nerd, and nerds were easy targets to bully. They had always looked down on these sickly literary people. Silin had changed into a new set of clothes after they left the port, and Ci Jincheng was not dressed ostentatiously either. Both of them were dressed in casual clothes that were not luxurious, and it was impossible to discern their identities. It was no wonder these people picked on them so quickly. They were certain that Silin and Ci Jincheng did not have much support behind them. However, the person's hand holding the snack froze in midair and even began to tremble. A gun barrel was pressed against his head. Other than Silin, the rest of them did not even see Ci Jincheng's movements clearly. They only felt that a gun had appeared out of nowhere, and it was only when their heads were pressed against that they suddenly realized that the other party had taken out a gun at some point in time. Gun control was very strict in 7 Lights, and most people did not have the qualifications to be equipped with a gun. These people did not expect that one of the 2 people they had their eyes on who looked like easy targets would be equipped with a gun. Moreover, this seemingly genteel guy was absolutely powerful. The 8 of them were stunned. It was obvious that this was the first time they had encountered such a target after bullying people so many times. They did not dare to run or shout even if they wanted to. Even their breathing was cautious. No matter how many of them there were, they were no match for a gun. It was as if there was an icy hand strangling their necks in the air, and a chill instantly spread throughout their bodies. Silin was only surprised for a moment the moment Ci Jincheng took out a gun. Other than that, no other change in his emotions could be seen. He continued to drink tea and eat the snacks. It would be a waste if he did not eat what he had paid for. Ci Jincheng's free hand held a teacup and drank leisurely. "I am a genteel person, and I do not like to solve problems with violence." "Genteel my ass." The 8 of them shouted in their hearts. Holy shit, this is the way to solve problems without violence? What about the violent way? Is it a high-energy laser cannon? We. The person who was pressed against the gun stuttered for a long time and almost bit his own tongue. Scram. Ci Jincheng did not want to hear an explanation at all. This so-called explanation was pure nonsense. He moved his finger, and the gun disappeared. Ci Jincheng withdrew his hand and continued to drink his tea. He did not look at the person at all. They knew that the gun did not disappear. It was because the other party's movements were too fast, and they could not capture his movements at all. From the moment Ci Jincheng took out a gun, even an idiot understood that this person was not to be trifled with. They would be idiots if they continued to stay here. Ci Jincheng did not even look at the fleeing people. His scholarly smile was still on his face. In 7 Lights, the best way to solve problems is absolute suppression. Silin raised his cup and gestured, "Good idea." After they finished their tea, the duo exchanged their numbers. Then, Silin stepped onto his newly bought hoverboard and headed towards the global train station. There was a special slow lane in the air, and it was a passage for flying tools that were not fast like hoverboards. As for fast-flying tools like flying cars, they had their own lanes. Silen bought some instant snacks and put them in his bag so that he would not have to look for another store when he was hungry. Riding on the hoverboard, he looked at the tall buildings on both sides and the pedestrians below from the sky. It was a different feeling. Silen did not use the manual rudder because it would consume even more energy. Energy ores and energy storage boxes were not cheap, and Silen was confident that he could control the hoverboard without the manual rudder. When he arrived at the station, the next train was still 20 minutes away. Silen put away the hoverboard, bought a newspaper and waited not far away from the platform. The good thing about a hoverboard was that it did not take up much space after it was put away. The 1-meter-long hoverboard was less than 20 centimeters after it was put away. Since his bag was filled with food, the hoverboard was put away by Silen. "Hey, that little kid over there." No one answered. "Hey, that little kid reading the newspaper over there." Still no one answered. "Hey, that little kid with a hoverboard on his left and a bag on his right is reading 7 Lights Weekly." Chapter 21. Silen raised his head. The person with the hoverboard on his left and the backpack on his right seemed to be reading 7 Lights Weekly, but the little boy was, following the voice. A white-haired old man was shouting at Silen from a chair not far away while holding a pile of parts in his hands. Seeing Silen looking over, the old man pointed at the side of Silen's chair. "Little boy, do me a favor and pass it over." The old man was panting a little as he spoke. He was probably tired. Silen picked up the parts that had rolled to the side of the chair, stood up and passed them to the old man. "Thanks, little boy." "Sir, I'm almost 18. "Oh, you're almost 18, little boy." "This old man is 130 years old." "Silen, never mind." "So be it, little boy." After the old man received the parts, he began to assemble the parts in his hands and assembled every interface accordingly. The assembly of many interfaces required a lot of technical content. An unskilled person would need to spend at least 10 minutes to connect a single connection, but this old man had done it in almost a second. It looked like he had a lot of skill in this line of work. Every finger was fully performing its function. Fulcrum, balance, compression. Although the old man was panting a little earlier, his hands were very steady. These parts in his hands were like fragmented pieces of art that were slowly assembled into a dazzling work of art. The old man assembled very seriously, and Silen also watched very seriously. He could learn a lot of assembly skills by observing the old man's movements. Silen had never seen a person who could fully utilize their fingers to this extent. In fact, every gap between their fingers was fully utilized. The parts jumped on their fingers and were assembled onto the main body in the next moment. Other than the skill of his fingers, Silen discovered that the old man was also very experienced in judging parts. He only needed to look at the interfaces on the main body, then sweep his gaze across the pile of parts placed on his knees, and he would be able to pick out the one he needed without error. While the old man was assembling, a three-dimensional image also appeared in Silen's mind. After a part was assembled, the next part that was assembled at the interface had already taken shape in his mind. Then, Silen's gaze and the old man's finger movements landed on the correct part almost at the same time. 10 minutes later, a 15-centimeter tall robot was completed. Silen had watched the assembly process from beginning to end. He knew very well just how complicated the circuit connections and the assembly of chip parts were inside this robot. Even some of the engineers he had met on planet Brown Earth would need at least half a day to complete the assembly of this robot. Moreover, the inspection's qualification had yet to be verified. However, the old man had completed the final product in 10 minutes, and the inspections showed that it was absolutely excellent. After the old man finished assembling the parts, he realized that the little doll who had helped him pick up the parts was watching from the side. His eyes flashed with interest. "Little doll, are you interested?" Silen looked at the little robot that was dancing smoothly in the old man's hand and answered, "No." After that, he turned around and prepared to return to his original seat. "Hey, kid, don't be in such a hurry to leave. Stay here and chat with this old man. It's boring to wait here alone. But I see you're enjoying yourself. Silen cursed in his heart. Wait for me to bring the bag and hoverboard over. Just leave it there. No one will take it. Come here. The old man was afraid that Celine would run away. He moved his butt and patted the empty seat next to him, signaling Celine to sit down. Silen had no choice but to sit down after looking at the bag and hoverboard. Little doll, did you see how I assembled the parts just now? Silen nodded. Did you see it clearly? There are a few parts that I don't understand. Which parts? Silen pointed out his doubts. Although he had completely memorized the movements of the old man assembling the parts, there were a few principles that he did not understand. The old man was very surprised by the few questions that Silen asked. If one did not have a certain understanding of the assembly of this model of robot, one would not be able to ask such questions. It seemed that this young man had learned it before. However, the old man did not show it on his face. He answered Silen's questions one by one. The old man spoke simply and straightforwardly. He did not use a lot of difficult professional jargon like some ostentatious teachers to flaunt their erudition. The circuit is the nervous system of the robot. It takes a lot of effort to install this nervous system accurately. This old man has a lot of experience, and practice makes perfect. After talking about the circuit connection, the old man pointed to several parts of the robot. These things seem simple, but it takes a lot of effort to manufacture them. For example, you young people like to play with guns. Some of you who are well off often customize gun barrels and firearms, but you don't pay attention to the manufacturing process. Let's not talk about the design. That's a tiring job. After that, you have to choose the materials, expand the gun barrel, cut the rifling. A series of processes need to be precise. The more the old man spoke, the more energized he became. In fact, he even gave a few popular gun models as examples and criticized them to the point of no return. Among them were the DKC series multipurpose titanium gun that was rather popular among youngsters and the Slaughter Elf that Silen had seen before. But I heard that those idiots from the Duance family have come up with a Carnage Elf too, these past few days. I haven't seen the specifics, but I hope it won't have a fatal flaw like the Carnage Elf eye. The old man's spittle flew everywhere as he spoke. His face was flushed. Although he did not say anything, he saw the approval in Silen's eyes. The more the old man criticized, the more enthusiastic he became. However, Silen was sweating in his heart. Those idiots from the Duance family. He was now under the Duance family's name. D. The beep sounded. The train had arrived. The people waiting at the platform all stood up, and the people in the waiting room also came out one after another. Old man, let me send you on the train first. Silen lifted the 2 bags of parts and prepared to help the old man carry the 2 bags of parts onto the train before getting off to grab his backpack and hoverboard. The weight of these 2 bags of parts was nothing to Silen, but the old man was old, and it took a lot of effort to carry them. Moreover, Silen quite admired the old man's research spirit. When it came to something related to his research, he would ignore it no matter how tired his body was. Ha, you're not bad, kid. What's your name? Who's your mechanical engineering grand instructor? I'll talk to your grand instructor later and have him give you more credits and GPA. The old man asked while walking towards the train door. Although in principle, a student's credits and GPA were given strictly according to the student's usual grades, in reality, the final credits and GPA given were also made up of many factors. If someone from above recommended a student, then the substitute instructor would give them more credits. There were many instructors for every type of course, but there would never be more than 5 grand instructors. The old man called him a grand instructor the moment he opened his mouth. It looked like the old man's status in Seven Lights was pretty high. However, didn't people of that level usually have a special car? Then I really have to thank you. But I'm a new student in Seven Lights, and I haven't registered yet. As for who the instructor is, I have even less of a clue. You're specially recruited? No, my family paid to throw me in to continue my education. The old man was truly surprised. He paused for a moment and said, "You have the qualifications to be specially recruited." The old man's words were very certain. He didn't even use the usual prefixes like, "I think," or "I think." It was straight up a very imposing statement. If I say you have it, then you have it. This was probably related to the old man's identity, and he was used to speaking like this. As if very dissatisfied that a student like Silen was not specially recruited, the old man snorted, "Name." Silen smiled and placed the 2 bags of parts next to the old man's seat. "I'm called Buzz." Buzz, the sound of a speeding car resounded. There were 2 open-top flying cars. One was crimson red, and the other bright yellow. When they flew past the station, the owner of the red car reached out and scooped Silen's backpack away. This was truly an evil act under the watchful eyes of the public, but the people at the station seemed to be used to it and did not have much of a reaction. It was obvious that the old man had seen it too. His eyes were as round as saucers. Earlier, he had told Silen that no one would take it. "You should go first." Once he was done, Silen quickly jumped out of the car, picked up the hoverboard that was not taken away, activated it, and chased after the old man on it. "Sigh, it's fine if there's nothing important, but isn't it futile to chase after a flying car with a hoverboard?" Someone commented. "Yeah, it's not like such a thing is rare. The people driving the flying cars are just bored out of their minds. It's not like they lack money, and they're purely looking for fun and irritating people. Even if they're caught by the police, they'll just be fined, compensated, and settled privately. That's why these people aren't afraid." Listening to the discussion around him, the old man was silent for 2 seconds. Then, he raised his hand and clicked on his communicator. He searched for a number on the pop-up interface, confirmed it, and dialed it. Chapter 22. At Seven Lights University's training base, inside the department head's office of the training division's office building. A middle-aged man and a muscular young man around 17 or 18 years old were conversing in front of a tea table. "Knight, what have you learned in the past 2 days at Seven Lights?" The middle-aged man asked the young man sitting in front of him with the smile of an elder looking at a junior. Although the middle-aged man was just sitting there, his every movement exuded the temperament of a soldier. The young man called Knight looked slightly impatient, but he was talking to an elder after all, so his tone did not go overboard. "In short, boring, utterly boring. Seven Lights isn't a military academy after all. It's impossible for the students to come into contact with guns and armor often, and even if they did, there wouldn't be a large-scale firepower training simulation. However, Seven Lights' online training platform is pretty good." The middle-aged man expressed that there were some things that he couldn't help even if he wanted to. "But those aren't real. Facing a real gun muzzle and a simulated gun muzzle is completely different. Also, the people here are utterly lacking in terms of physical fitness." Bates' face was full of disdain. He had fought a few rounds with the senior students for the past 2 days, and although a few of them were barely passable, they were barely passable. Knight didn't really take them seriously. If he wanted to improve his combat strength, he could only train with the people in the training division. A portion of the people in the training division and police division were transferred over from the Galactic Army. Soldiers were different from academies, and the killing intent they exuded during battle excited Knight. This isn't a military academy after all. The middle-aged man had said this countless times in the past 2 days, and he felt very helpless. Why don't you apologize to your dad and arrange to go to a military academy at Sector C right now? You haven't registered here anyway. Impossible. I'd rather be bored here until I graduate than apologize. Plus, I'm not in the wrong at all. Those bastards deserve a beating. They deserve a beating. A wave of hostility rose from Knight's body at the mention of this matter. Didn't I just beat up a bunch of noisy, pretentious rich kids? I'll beat them all the same the next time I see them. The middle-aged man smiled wryly. The father and son duo were so alike that their stubbornness was hard to reverse once it was triggered. Just as he was about to say something, his communicator suddenly rang. He gestured to Knight to wait for a moment and looked. He didn't recognize the number, and it wasn't even a video call, just a voice call. Pondering who it was, Huan picked up the communicator and said with the imposing manner of the training division director, "I'm Huan." Little Nail, the moment he heard the voice, Huan shot up from his chair and reflexively brought his feet together in a standard military stance. Then, he answered with a forceful voice, "Yes." Knight was so shocked that he nearly fell off his chair. His mouth was agape as he stared at the man who was acting like an elder just a moment ago. Now, he was standing ramrod straight, listening to the admonishment of the person on the other end of the communicator. "Yes. Okay, don't worry, I will immediately inform the security department to take action." "Okay, I know, please don't worry." "Okay, be careful." It was only after the communication ended that Huan's tense body relaxed a little. His expression was bitter, and it was much deeper than when he was talking to Knight just now. Also, why did Old Master Mo change his number again? Speaking of which, Old Master Mo changed his number more and more frequently to prevent people from bothering him. It was probably because the new students had arrived and there were more people asking to visit him. "Uncle Hua, what happened?" "We'll talk later." Huan didn't have the time to explain too much to Knight. He turned around and connected to the security team. The call was quickly connected. Nail, why are you looking for me at this time? Are you bored and looking for practice?" The other side teased. Huan ignored the other's teasing and said seriously, "Gerard, I just received a report that there was a robbery at the global train station in the trade zone. 2 flying cars stole the backpack of a waiting student." On the other side, Gerard couldn't help but facepalm when he heard this. They couldn't be bothered to care about such things. They were all small squabbles between students, and it was almost no big deal. Moreover, it was just a backpack that they stole. It wasn't anything important. Plus, those rich kids who raced their cars didn't lack money at all. But someone who could get the public security squad to mobilize troops through Huan obviously had some weight to his name. Gerard's biggest annoyance was that he would be pissed if the public security squad was dragged into the squabbles between the children of a few great families. "Nail, tell me, who made the report?" "Your old boss, General Mo's father, 7 Lights Vice Headmaster, Old Mo." Before Huan could finish, Gerard said righteously, "To commit such a despicable act as a flying car robbery in broad daylight. This is outrageous." Huan. When Gerard was done, he turned around and roared at his subordinates who were sparring outside the window, "Bastards, get into formation and move out. Whoever is 1 step slower will be stripped and thrown to run naked around the city." After he was done shouting, he said to the communicator, "Nail, tell Old Mo not to worry. We will immediately move out and take care of those 2 itching brats." After turning off the communicator, Huan pressed the control button on his hand. A screen drooped down, and after he had inputted the coordinates, a few images appeared. They were images taken from the top, the side, and the front facing Silin and the 2 flying cars. Knight had also come over curiously to take a look. There was an uninhabited area between the trade zone and the nightless city of the entertainment zone. The 3 red, yellow, and blue cars that flew past the boundless green forest on the ground stirred up a wave of green. "Fuck, that kid actually chased us for so long on that shitty hoverboard. What's in his bag?" The person in the bright yellow flying car complained. "Other than a newspaper, a tablet, and some clothes, it's all food. The clothes look like they're made of a pretty valuable material, but there's nothing else of value." The person in the crimson flying car rummaged through Silin's bag and said, "Fuck, he chased us for so long with just this. Another hothead, I wonder how many high-efficiency energy cells he used." The person attributed the reason why Silin chased them for so long to the high-efficiency energy cells. "That's right. TCH, he wants to chase after a flying car with a shitty hoverboard?" It's useless even if he used 100 high-efficiency energy cells. That kid is a complete idiot. Ignore him and speed up. That kid won't last long anyway. Plus, that shitty hoverboard of his doesn't have much of a burden on the high-efficiency energy cells. Don't let it explode while chasing. Ha, that's interesting. Let's wait and see that kid's hoverboard explode. Oh. The duo roared arrogantly and continued to increase the speed of the car. Sillin narrowed his eyes and increased the force under his feet. He also adjusted his body to an angle with the least resistance, and an invisible aura around him broke through the air like a shuttle. He didn't have goggles, but this speed didn't affect Sillin's vision at all. Following the sound of the hoverboard breaking through the air, the current Sillin seemed to have merged with the hoverboard as he shot out like a blue homing bullet. He possessed both speed and agility. Sillin's brain calculated the opponent's speed, the amount of pedaling force he needed to use, the number of pedals he needed to use, and the endurance of the hoverboard. This hoverboard relied on energy to provide itself with maximum speed, so it couldn't catch up to the two flying cars in front of it. That was why Sillin reduced the amount of energy and used human pedaling instead. Inside the training division's office, Neil and Knight were staring at the screen. This kid isn't simple at all. Neil asked. He didn't use the manual rudder, but completely controlled it with his mind. It's obvious that his mind control is very strong from the way he nimbly dodged the obstacles. Not only that, he saved energy and used all the energy that was originally allocated to the manual rudder to maintain the hoverboard's flight. If he had started chasing with the hoverboard from the train station at the trade zone, the fact that he was able to chase this far without being shaken off by the flying car means that this guy's stamina is pretty good. From the distorted shockwaves when he stepped on the hoverboard, it can be seen that this guy is very strong. At this point, Knight's eyes were already revealing a strong desire to fight. Who is he? There was no way such a person was unknown. Neil entered a series of passwords and coordinates on the other screen. Through the 7 lights card's location and identification, he could confirm the cardholder's identity. Sillin Duance? The Duance families? On the other side, a special passenger flying car from the trade zone to the entertainment zone's nightless city was traveling in the air. A couple of students were bored as they stared at the endless green forest outside the window. Suddenly, a student who was looking outside the window opened his eyes wider and wider. Holy shit, is that bro stepping on a hoverboard? The people beside him looked outside the window. 2 flying cars and the hoverboard that was hot on their heels appeared in everyone's sight, and they quickly overtook the passenger car. Is that really a hoverboard and not a plane? Bullshit, is there a plane that looks like a hoverboard? I think, this is actually a hoverboard commercial, isn't it? Someone else expressed his opinion. Someone looked around. I don't see a film crew around. If it really is a hoverboard, then I'm going to buy one like this. I just don't know what brand it is. It's fine, I recorded the scene just now. No matter what the people on the passenger car were discussing, Sillin's only wish right now was to take pictures of these 2 bag robbers and fish out a sum of compensation money. The hoverboard might just be scrapped after this flight. The 2 flying cars in front continued to accelerate, and Sillin also increased the force and frequency of his steps. The sound of the hoverboard breaking through the air could be heard clearly by everyone inside the passenger car. Before long, the 3 shadows of red, yellow, and blue disappeared from the passenger car's sight. Not good, the hoverboard is almost at its limit. Sillin's mind swiftly calculated the angle and success rate of his next move. The duo who were chatting inside the flying car suddenly heard a loud explosion behind them. Ha, it exploded, it exploded. That kid's hoverboard exploded. The person inside the red car had a look of wild joy on his face. He was just about to turn around and look at the kid's terrible state behind them when he suddenly heard a loud bang. His vision blurred, and the flying car crashed uncontrollably towards the ground. In the next moment, there was another bang. The other bright yellow flying car was kicked away while doing a difficult roll. Inside the training division's office, Neil and Knight were both dumbfounded as they stared at the screen. Chapter 23. The two people inside the flying car did not understand what was going on, but when Neil and Knight saw everything clearly in front of the training division's screen. The moment the hoverboard exploded, Sillin borrowed the impact produced by the explosion to charge towards the crimson flying car. He slapped the car's rear and used the force of the slap to swiftly kick the bright yellow flying car at the side. In the blink of an eye, one of the two flying cars was slapped down, and the other was kicked away. When Neil and Knight were not shocked by whether or not Sillin had slapped down or kicked the two cars, but by how accurately Sillin had grasped the timing. Borrowing the momentum of the explosion caused by the hoverboard's overload would not succeed if he was a moment too early, and he would be hurt by the explosion's shockwave if he was a moment too late. At the same time, Sillin was able to accurately lock onto the crimson flying car's next point of impact after he was launched. Then, he would borrow the force to kick the bright yellow flying car away. Knight pointed at Sillin, who had landed safely on the screen, and said, "How can a person like this be unknown?" When Neil did not answer Knight's question and sighed emotionally, as expected of the man under Elder Hiroshi's protection. But since when did the Duance family produce such a person? A person like this was obviously a battle-hardened veteran. There was no way he was the same as those tender newbies. Moreover, when Neil could see that the kid was quite decisive and did not hesitate in the slightest from this scene alone. Inside the vast green forest, after two loud crashes, Sillin slowly walked to the side of the crimson flying car. The car's body was already deformed, and some of its internal components were scattered everywhere. Some had even landed far away. The flying car's energy system was relatively safe, so it did not explode. Although the person inside the car was protected by the car's protective bag and was not seriously injured, he was obviously still in shock. His eyes were dull, his body was still trembling, and his teeth were chattering. Looking at the person, Sillin took out his backpack from inside the car and checked the contents inside. He curled his lips. He actually ate the snacks he bought. Ripping off the protective bag, Sillin grabbed the person's face and shook it. It was only then that the person slowly moved his focus to Sillin. His already pale face turned even paler as he said shakily, Don't kill me. I'll return the backpack. How much money do you want? I'll pay you." He was truly afraid. He had never encountered something like this before. The moment the car was slapped down, his entire body seemed to be enveloped in despair. "You make it sound like I'm a robber." Sillin took out a tablet and wrote on it, then passed it to the person. "Because your evil deeds have caused me serious losses, so you have to pay me back. This is what you should do. Here, the details are all recorded here. A hoverboard costs 2,000 star coins, and the energy storage consumes 500 star coins. You ate 3 of my snacks, 5 star coins each, so 3 of them is 15 star coins. However, these 3 snacks are from the trade zone, so I can't go back there to buy them now. So, these 3 snacks will be 30 star coins, and there will be 10,000 star coins for mental damage. Of course, the most important thing is that this matter has also wasted my time. You know that time can't be bought with money, so I'll take a loss and count it as 10,000 star coins." Sillin said a lot of things, and finally concluded, "That's a total of 50,000 star coins. Is there a problem?" The person was no longer in the mood to think. He only shook his head and nodded. "All right, that's it. Leave your fingerprint." Sillin handed the tablet to the person. The person trembled as he pressed his fingerprint on the tablet. "Where's the card?" The person trembled as he took out his 7 lights card. "Yo, it's even orange. What year are you?" Two. It was at this moment the security team's alarm rang, and the person's eyes that were filled with terror suddenly lit up as if he had seen his savior. The security team had sent a motorcade. In the past, it was already good enough for the security team to send out a car when something like this happened. Today, it could be said that they were paying extra attention to this matter. Gerard was personally leading the team. On the way here, the surveillance on Gerard's car only showed 3 rapidly moving indicators. It was possible to tell which was the flying car and which was the hoverboard, because both hoverboards and flying cars had GPS signals in 7 lights. However, Gerard did not know what exactly happened, so when he saw the hoverboard's indicator disappear on the surveillance, his entire body turned cold. Oh no, how am I going to explain this to Sir Imo? Although the 2 flying cars had crashed, their bodies were not destroyed, and their GPS signals had not disappeared either. Therefore, what Gerard saw was the 2 cars' indicators moving strangely before coming to a stop. Gerard urged the security team to hurry over. However, when they saw the scene in person, the security team members were a little dumbfounded. Both flying cars had crashed. What on earth happened? Right now, the only person Gerard cared about was Celine. Juanil had already sent Celine's information to Gerard, so the moment Gerard saw Celine at the scene, he ran straight towards him. "Aunt Celine, is it? I am the security team Captain Gerard." Gerard wore a kind smile on his face. When he saw that Celine was fine, Gerard's heart also relaxed. Celine leaned against the car and looked at the passing Gerard. He was sure that he did not know this person, but before he could answer, he heard the person still sitting in the car scream, "Help!" While screaming, he pulled himself out of the flying car with great effort and ran straight towards Gerard, who was wearing the security team's logo. Gerard threw the running person to the team members behind him. He had no time to pay attention to this guy right now. "We have received a report of a flying car robbery at a train station in the trade zone. We need to understand the situation right now. Hello, Captain Gerard. I am very grateful that everyone from the security team came to uphold justice, but we have reached an agreement to settle this privately. That's for the best." Gerard shouted in his heart. He did not want to get involved in the conflict between the children of great families. But when he thought of Sir Imo, Gerard still recorded the bag robber's demerit and deducted his credits and GPA. "Captain Gerard, do you have a card reader? I want to borrow it, I want to transfer it." "Transfer? I have one in my car." Gerard led Celine over. When he saw Celine swipe his card and transfer the money, and then very calmly return the card to the original owner, Gerard couldn't help but think that perhaps they really did come here for nothing. With Gerard's experience, he could naturally guess what had happened after seeing the scene. He couldn't help but think much more highly of Celine. Before, he was still giving face to Sir Imo, but now he had to admit Celine's ability. The person in the other bright yellow flying car was also brought over. His situation was similar to the one in the crimson flying car. He was trembling so much that he was almost carried over by the security team. After the main matters were settled, Gerard had his men deal with the aftermath of the scene, and he and a few team members drove Celine and the other 2 away. However, Celine got off the car at the edge of Nightless City. He still wanted to observe the situation in Nightless City. After Celine got off the car, a security team member next to Gerard's side, "Captain, that kid is actually a King Kong, isn't he? A hoverboard chasing a flying car." It was truly unimaginable, and not just anyone could overturn 2 flying cars with just a hoverboard powered by a normal energy cell. Not even Gerard himself could guarantee it. At the same time, a video was released on 7 Lights' internal network, and the name, Hoverboard Kid, began to spread throughout 7 Lights. Chapter 24. There were a lot of people who knew of Hoverboy, but very few knew that Hoverboy was Celine. This was because Celine's figure was a little blurry in the video, and his face could not be seen clearly. When he was chasing after the flying car, the air around Celine's body was compressed and distorted irregularly. Moreover, the clarity of the video recorded by the people on the passenger flying car was not high, and the distorted parts could not be restored in the future. For this reason, the person who recorded the video had even bought a more professional camera so that he would not regret it in the future. Celine had seen the video by chance. Fortunately, he had changed his clothes when he arrived at Nightless City, and his original clothes were damaged due to the air friction while chasing after the flying car. Otherwise, even if he did not know the true face of Hoverboy, he would still be familiar with his clothes. After arriving at Nightless City, Silen deeply felt the money-making ability of this enormous entertainment system. More than 80% of the people who came to Seven Lights, especially those who came from wealthy families, spent their money here. Tuition fees and whatnot were practically worthless in comparison. Amusement parks, bars, game halls, hotels, casinos. The madness of entertainment knew no day or night. In Nightless City, there were disputes at almost every moment, but the security team would not care too much. Seven Lights had a clear rule that as long as the matter was within a certain acceptable range, they could be allowed to cause as much trouble as they wanted. But once the limit was exceeded, Seven Lights' punishment would be very strict, and there were plenty of people who were expelled from school for causing too much trouble. Other than that, there were also related laws and regulations. Once they were enforced, the security team and the training division would be mobilized. Who were the security team and the training division? They were the people sent by the galactic military who had experienced life and death battles. Resistance? No way. Silen walked around Nightless City for 2 days before continuing to his next stop. For the next 3 days, Silen went to the training zone, the R&D zone and other areas. However, those areas were more restricted, and Silen did not have the authority to do so right now. Although he had only observed from the periphery, Silen still deeply felt the uniqueness of these areas. On the last day of registration, Silen took the train back to the school district. According to the original plan, there was still plenty of time for registration. The reason why Silen only registered after he was done with his stroll was because he was only allowed to walk around the teaching area after registration, and was not allowed to leave as he pleased. This was because after registration, all of the students' files in Seven Lights would be activated, and they would truly become Seven Lights official students. Seven Lights management was relatively stricter towards new students. This was the management method adopted by most of the schools in Sector B. Following the directions on the map, Silen arrived at the reporting area. The first 2 days and the last day of the check-in period were the peak hours, but there was absolutely no one in the last hour of the check-in period. From afar, he could see that there weren't many students at the registration counter. There were only 2 staff members sitting there, shaking their arms. It seemed like they had a lot of work today and were exhausted. Those guys came to Seven Lights University so early and went to Nightless City to have fun. They only came back on the last day to register. "I'm so tired," a staff member complained. "It can't be helped. It's like this every year." If those young masters had registered a few days earlier, they would have rotted in the school district. A person lying on a chair answered. "There's still an hour left. There shouldn't be anyone left. We'll leave after a nap." "I'm afraid not. There's a kid in front of us." Looking at the slowly approaching Silen, the duo's complexion turned a little ugly. They could not even hide their impatient expressions. After looking at Silen's card, one of them pointed at a small device beside his hand, swiped the Seven Lights card on it. After the Seven Lights card was swiped, Silen's information appeared on the screen. The Duance family? A big family. Seeing Silen's information, the duo's attitude at the reporting area improved a lot. They forced a smile and passed Silen a tablet. "Please fill in these pieces of information. There are also matters such as dormitory selection at the back." At this point, the staff member paused for a moment. "I don't think there are any single dormitories left." There aren't any double dormitories either." "I'm sorry, but I think you can only choose a quad dormitory." "But quad dormitories are good as well. It's big, and in Seven Lights, the space in a dormitory has always been 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 less than 2 + 2 less than 4. Also, quad dormitories are all villas." The person explained the benefits of quad dormitories to Silen. In truth, Silen also understood that although quad dormitories had the largest space and were slightly more than 4 single dormitories combined, the extra space was just a yard. Many people did not care for it, but Silen was an exception. In Seven Lights student dormitory area, the most expensive accommodation was a single villa, and the most affordable was actually a single apartment. However, these two types were obviously the most popular, and those who came a little late were not able to choose them. Quad dormitories had always been thought of as a dormitory filled with conflict and trouble. After all, there were plenty of people who did not like each other when squeezed into a single apartment. In Seven Lights, there were frequent incidents where the entire villa was destroyed due to conflict between roommates. The reason why it was called quad dormitory was because other than the space inside the dormitory, everyone had their own training room, lounge, bathroom, study and so on. A single dormitory only had one set of these things, and a quad dormitory had 4 sets of everything except the yard, living room and kitchen. Then I'll choose a quad villa. Although Silen's ideal choice was a single apartment, it didn't matter if there wasn't one. The living conditions here were much better than the place he used to live in. While Silen was filling in the form, another person walked in from the registration office's entrance. It was a familiar face. Silen, you're reporting in at this time too. C.I. Jincheng closed the book in his hands and walked over with a smile. C.I. Jincheng's 7 Lights card was orange, meaning that he was specially recruited. The two staff immediately widened their smiles and enthusiastically introduced the necessary procedures to C.I. Jincheng. The reason they were so enthusiastic wasn't just because C.I. Jincheng was a specially recruited student. The most important reason was the information displayed on C.I. Jincheng's card. The surname C.I. was uncommon in the galaxy, and with C.I. Jincheng's qualification as a specially recruited student, the two staff immediately thought of that family, the academic titans, the C.I. family. There wasn't a single person in the academic world who didn't know of the C.I. family. The frequency of the C.I. family members appearing in the 2 top magazines, Glory and Coda, was breathtaking. Moreover, the C.I. family's influence in the galaxy's military and politics couldn't be underestimated either. It was no wonder that the two were so enthusiastic. Logically speaking, according to the registration order, every dormitory should be filled up before they could arrange for another dormitory. However, Silen and C.I. Jincheng's backgrounds were right there, and the two knew each other. The staff might as well do them a favor and reopen a quad villa. There were already 3 people living in the previous villa anyway, so they had to reopen a new one sooner or later. While the two were filling in the form, the sound of speeding suddenly came. There was the sound of a flying car and the sound of a hoverboard. Screech, the ruby-like body drifted beautifully, and the luxurious flying car came to a stop. The roof opened, revealing a familiar face to Silen. Andrira Lung. At the same time the flying car stopped, the hoverboard also stopped in front of the door. A muscular young man jumped off the hoverboard, put it away and walked in. The two entered at almost the same time. C.I. Jincheng's eyelids twitched when he saw them. These two. Chapter 25. When they saw the 2 people who had just entered the door, the smiles on the 2 employees' faces widened once more. However, it was different from the mentality they had when they were facing C.I. Jincheng. Right now, the 2 of them were trying their best to smile as sincerely and passionately as possible, but their backs were starting to sweat profusely. With their eyesight, it was only natural that they could tell that the ruby-encrusted flying car was not something an ordinary rich family could buy, and that hoverboard was a military hoverboard. A military hoverboard was not something a normal flying car could compare to. Moreover, there was only one place in 7 Lights University that had this kind of hoverboard, and that was the training division. The duo knew very well what kind of people in the training division were. To be able to obtain a military hoverboard from the training division, it was obvious that this kid on a hoverboard had a pretty good military background. Anyone with a military background was not easy to deal with. Yo, Boston Ivy, we meet again. What a coincidence. Lung let out a bright smile. He really did not expect to run into Silen at this time. Although Lung was driving a super luxurious flying car, his outfit was still the same one Silen saw at the trade zone. It looked really incongruous. What a coincidence. Silen replied with a smile. Silen did not dislike this person. In fact, he found him interesting. A distinguished background could not hide this person's ability. Perhaps many people did not notice, but Silen was sure that Lung was definitely not weak. As for the young man on the hoverboard, he carried an untamed aura amidst his resoluteness. When he saw Silen, his eyes flashed with a fighting spirit as strong as a star. Even though they were just bystanders, the two employees felt a sense of fear. This young man was none other than Knight, who had watched the entire process of Silen slapping down the flying car with Neil at the training division. Silen was puzzled when he saw Knight's gaze. Who the hell is this guy? He seems to know me. However, Silen did not show any signs of backing down in the face of the threatening fighting spirit in Knight's eyes. Knight and Lung's 7 lights cards were the same as Silen's, red cards. After they swiped their cards on the machine, their information was displayed on the screen. Andryra Lung, Fiegler Knight. The two employees exchanged glances with each other as their little hearts trembled violently. They had been in 7 lights for so many years, so of course they were familiar with some of the more sensitive surnames. Everyone knew that the Andryra family was so poor they only had money left. What was more important was that the surname Fiegler had suddenly appeared. Fiegler came from a military family. There were already quite a few generals with the surname Fiegler, and among the 8 great marshals of the Interstellar Alliance Army, one of them had the surname Fiegler. The 2 staff members carefully dealt with the 2 people in front of them, for fear of offending these 2 little devils. Although there were plenty of rich kids in 7 lights, there really weren't many who had backgrounds like the ones in front of them. In comparison, Silen's Duan's family background was much more low-key. Originally, the 2 employees were going to report to their superiors and request for a few more single villas, but Lung and Knight chose to stay in the same dormitory as Silen and C.I. Jincheng right away. This surprised the 2 staff members. It was rare for someone with such a deep background to choose the least popular 4-person room. With their background, as long as they persevered, it was not impossible for them to get a single villa. After the 4 of them were done with the procedures, Lung waved his hand, "Let's go. Sit in my car, roommates. Our beautiful 4-person life has begun, 4-person mode." Following Lung's voice, his 1-seater flying car swiftly transformed. The body of the car was slightly elongated, and 3 seats appeared one after the other. Silen did not hold back and jumped straight into the car. It would be a waste not to take a free ride. When C.I. Jincheng saw Silen jump in, he paused for a moment before jumping into the car as well. Knight picked up the hoverboard he had put away and jumped into Lung's car. "Yo, bro, so you don't mind my car now? You were looking down on me when I offered you a ride before." Lung joked when he saw Knight jump into the car. When Lung drove his flying car over from the trade zone and was about to reach the school zone, he ran into Knight, who was coming over from the training zone on a hoverboard. "Cut the bullshit. You didn't even get a seat at the time. It's obvious that you were just joking." Knight curled his lips. Lung smiled and said nothing. At the time, he really was just joking. Even if Knight wanted to hitch a ride, Lung would not have paid him any attention. However, they were all in the same dorm now. In the old man's words, they were one of us. Of course he had to treat his own people better. It was only after the flying car had flown far away and disappeared out of sight that the 2 staff members finally slumped down on their chairs. "Holy shit, so many people signed up today. I didn't think that the finale would show up at the last hour." Yeah, who would have thought that 4 big shots would show up at the very beginning? Especially Knight. Sai, tell me, he has such a deep military background. Why did he come to 7 lights instead of going to a military academy at Sector C? It doesn't seem like the Fiegler family's style. What's wrong with that? The children of those big families have weird tempers. Maybe they wanted a change. Look at the Andryra family, which one of them isn't a weirdo? That's true. Dorm room number 13 in Sector 6. This is probably the dorm for this term's new students, no, maybe even the entire 7 Lights University right now. Silen's quartet's dorm was number 13 in Sector 6. Sector 6 was a private villa area, and 13 was the house number. The number displayed in the recording system was 0613. After the number 0613 was keyed into the flying car, a clear navigation appeared. It didn't take long for the quartet to arrive at their assigned dorm. The first floor of the dorm took up at least 500 square meters of space. The dorm had 3 floors, and the first floor was the largest. The second and third floors were about the same in size, and excluding the courtyard, the 3 floors added up to at least 1,200 square meters. The wide courtyard was paved with grass, and above the fence was a light screen that reached straight into the sky. However, those who were not part of this dorm were not allowed to enter. Forcible entry would trigger an alarm and rebound. The target of the light screen was a 7 lights card. While they were going through the procedures at the registration center, the quartet's identity information had already been entered into the dorm management system. The light screen in the courtyard opened up after sensing their 7 lights cards, and the flying car flew straight into the courtyard. Lung sighed the moment he saw the dorm. It's so fucking small. Silen. Although C.I. Jinchang and Knight did not say anything, it was obvious from their expressions that they had the same thoughts as Lung. Silen sighed in his heart. Fine, I'm a poor man. I won't compare myself to them. The keys to the dorm were all 7 lights cards. As for the locks of each room, they would have to be set up separately. There was a setup system in every bedroom, and it was used to set the locks of their own bedroom, study, training room and so on. The 4 training rooms, the living room and the kitchen were all here. To Silen's surprise, other than the first floor which had a fixed layout, the second and third floor could be moved according to one's preferences. Just like toy blocks, they could move and assemble according to one's preferences. Therefore, after a series of adjustments, there was no longer a clear boundary between the second and third floor. There was only the first floor above and the first floor below. After they were assigned their respective bedrooms, study and so on, Lung shouted, "Let's go eat first. I'm starving to death, and I don't have the energy to tidy up the rest." Bullshit, did you tidy up? What's with those 2 home robots? All you did was adjust the distribution of space a little. But it was true that it was almost time for dinner. Never mind, I'll tidy up the rest after dinner. Should we order takeout or eat there? Silen asked. The 7 Lights Handbook mentioned that the cafeteria had takeout, and many students had ordered takeout instead of going to the cafeteria. Of course we're going to the cafeteria on our first day, and we can also see the beauties of 7 Lights. They're pretty good quality, you know. Lung smiled cheekily. The dorm area was divided into 7 sections. Section 1 and 2 were single villas, Section 3 and 4 were double villas, Section 5 and 6 were quadruple villas, and Section 7 was single apartments. These 7 sections formed a ring, and the center of the ring was the cafeteria, convenience store, hospital, coffee shop, and so on. The cafeteria was in the shape of a heptagonal star, and every corner was facing a dorm area. When Silen's quartet arrived at the cafeteria, they first swiped their cards and reserved a seat. It was fine as long as they could arrive within 30 minutes. If the person who swiped their card did not arrive within 30 minutes, then the seat would automatically be cancelled and become unoccupied. After the quartet had reserved their seats, they went their separate ways to choose their dishes. After all, their tastes were different. But just as Silen was choosing his dishes, a shout suddenly came from behind him. Silen. Chapter 26. The owner of the voice was none other than Alan, whom Silen had met on the transport. Alan had originally come down from the passageway at the side to pick people up, but he didn't expect to see Silen, who was about to pick his dishes. What a coincidence, Alan. Silen waved the tray in his hand and greeted Alan. Looking at the empty tray in Silen's hand, Alan hurriedly said, "Silen, it just so happens that you haven't picked your dishes yet. Come, let's go upstairs. It's my treat today. I wanted to tell you a long time ago, but I don't have your number. It just so happens that I ran into you here." While saying that, Alan grabbed Silen's arm and dragged him upstairs, as if he was afraid that Silen would refuse. Ever since he saw Silen and Kang Man's discussion on the transport, and that complicated formula on the writing board, Alan had greatly admired this peer of his. Alan was also very enthusiastic towards those who were truly talented and knowledgeable. Never bully the old, this was the ideology his old man had instilled in him. Don't be in such a hurry. I came here with my roommates. I can't just leave without saying a word, can I? Silen put down the tray and said. Ah. Roommates? Silen, how many rooms is your accommodation? Alan had always thought that Silen would choose a single villa given his conditions, but he didn't expect that to not be the case. I just registered today, so there's only a 4-person villa left. Oh, I understand. I also registered 3 days ago just to grab a single villa, but I still didn't make it in time. I can only choose a double villa. Alan made a regretful expression. The reason I'm treating today is so that I can get to know my roommates and the people in the surrounding accommodation, and also a couple of people I've gotten to know after coming here. Oh right, I've also invited Pride. As for Kang Man, he seems to be a bit busy and can't come. Alan could be said to have put in a lot of effort to invite Pride, and he lost count of how many good words he had said. At the same time, Alan also felt it was a bit of a pity. He was going to invite this term's twin stars of 7 lights to take a photo together, but he didn't expect Kang Man to reject the invitation with the excuse that he didn't have time. Silen, contact your other 3 roommates. It's my treat. Let's go together. The more the merrier. We're all freshmen this year, so let's get to know each other. By the way, there are a few beauties coming today. Don't miss them. The 4 of them had exchanged numbers when they were on Lung's flying car earlier, so Silen immediately dug out all 3 of their numbers and dialed them at the same time. After he told them about Alan's treat, other than Lung who was more straightforward, Ci Jincheng and Knight were a little reluctant, but they still agreed to it in the end. Ci Jincheng and Knight had agreed mainly because of Silen. Otherwise, with Ci Jincheng's personality, he wouldn't like that kind of absolutely chaotic atmosphere. Knight was also disdainful of communicating with those pretentious bastards who didn't know shit. It was already good enough that he didn't greet them with a punch. While Silen was communicating with the trio, Alan ran to the entrance and looked around for a moment as if he was waiting for someone. Not long later, he returned with 3 beautiful girls, and said something to them that caused the 3 beauties to laugh so hard that they shook like flowers. Their watery eyes added an extra layer of charm to them, and the students who were holding their trays around them stared straight at them. They didn't even realize that the dishes on their trays had been taken away. 3 beauties, allow me to introduce myself. This is my friend Silen. Silen, and these 3 are, Alan. Didn't you say that everyone has been waiting for a long time? One of the girls cut in before Alan could introduce himself. That's right, Alan. Hurry up and bring us up. The other girl flicked her hair and glanced sideways at Alan. Although Silen looked good and had a good temperament, there were plenty of people like him in 7 Lights. Therefore, they really didn't have much interest in Silen at all. Moreover, didn't the big shots usually go upstairs to a private room to eat? Seeing Alan's hesitation, Silen smiled. It's fine, Alan. Bring them up first. Then. Silen, wait for your roommates to arrive and go up together. The Freedom Hall is on the 2nd floor. I'll come and pick you up after I've sent them up. The moment they heard that Silen actually had roommates, and not just one at that, the 3 girls lost even the slightest interest in Silen. A person who lived in a 4-person room was not qualified to enter their eyes. Silen didn't care about the 3 girls' gazes at all. He leaned against the side of the passage and waited for them. If it wasn't for Knight's words today, perhaps they wouldn't have chosen the dishes themselves and ordered the robots instead. Every time he recalled Ci Jincheng and Lung's expressions when they heard Knight's words, Silen wanted to laugh. On the way to the cafeteria, Knight shared a little of his past experience. In fact, he had always ordered the robots to deliver his food before he entered the intermediate education school. However, there was one time when he saw a couple of mischievous fellows shoving dandruff into the separated plates. When the robots came to carry the plates, they would only scan the name of the dish, the presence of other living creatures, the presence of poisonous substances and so on. Since then, Knight had always personally carried the plates, and it was obvious that Ci Jincheng and Lung had always let the robots carry their food. At the time, both Ci Jincheng and Lung felt nauseous. When they arrived at the cafeteria and saw that there were indeed a lot of people who personally carried the plates, the two became even more certain. It looked like a lot of people had similar experiences. Therefore, they decided to try their best to personally carry the plates in the future. Or they could just get a plate-carrying robot and set up a few more scanning procedures. Not long after Lan went up, Ci Jincheng and the other two came over one after another. It looked like the experience of personally carrying the plates wasn't that great. Silan, where's your friend? Lung looked left and right, but didn't see anyone else. He brought the three beauties upstairs. Silan pointed upstairs. Oh, beauties. But Silan, tell me first, is your relationship with that friend of yours close? Silan briefly explained what happened on the transport plane to him. So you guys aren't that close, huh? But why was that kid so enthusiastic? Chev Allen. Chev. Oh, I remember now, the family that founded Star of Tomorrow and Prospect. Not bad, these two electronic publications both have more than 60 contribution points. Lung was obviously more familiar with these things, but judging from his tone, the Chev family was only not bad to Lung. Speaking of Star of Tomorrow, both Ci Jincheng and Knight knew about it, because they had both appeared on that publication before. So, all three of you have appeared on that electronic publication? Silan said. Appearing on an electronic publication with 60 contribution points wasn't something that could be done with money and background alone. The most important thing was real talent. Just like Kong Man, who had an ordinary background, he was able to obtain the title of Double Star, like Pride, completely through his own talent and ability. Hearing Silan's words, Knight snorted. You can appear on those publications if you want, but don't think that you can hide from other people's eyes just because you hide. We'll practice tomorrow. Indeed, a hoverboard kid who can chase after two flying cars with just a normal hoverboard and not get left behind. We have high hopes for you. Lung winked. Judging from Ci Jincheng's calm expression, he obviously knew that hoverboard kid was Silan. You guys know all about it. Silan scratched his head. That's not all I know. Not just anyone can overturn two flying cars with a lousy hoverboard. That's why we need to practice properly before school starts. It sure isn't easy to find a good opponent in Seven Lights. The moment this was mentioned, Knight became eager again. The fighting spirit in his eyes instantly rose. Alright, let's find a place to practice tomorrow. Of course Silan wouldn't turn down a chance to practice. Don't tell me there's more to this hoverboard kid. Quick, tell us, Knight. Lung immediately moved closer. While they were going upstairs, Knight summarized the situation in a single sentence. It was simple and clear. Then, Lung's eyes lit up with amazement. Silan, go endorse the hoverboards my family sells. You'll get great treatment. Andrira's family did have a hoverboard manufacturing factory, and the brand was pretty famous too. Every hoverboard was priced at 10,000 galactic credits. Silan smiled without saying a word. After reporting Freedom Hall, a little flying robot brought the four over. They didn't take more than a few steps before they saw Alan coming from the corner. Hey, Silan, I was just about to go down and pick you up. Alan's voice came to an abrupt halt. His eyes widened because he saw the three people beside Silan clearly. Chapter 27. A lot of people may have heard of the names Andrira Lung, Ci Jincheng, and Fiegler Knight, but not many actually knew them. Alan's family had founded two League of Stars electronic magazines, so the faces of many famous people were deeply engraved in Alan's mind. That was why Alan recognized the trio beside Scylla the moment he saw them. For a time, he didn't know how to react. He hadn't received any news that these three would come to Seven Lights University, and Alan had always thought that the brightest stars of this term were the twin stars of Seven Lights, Kong Man and Pride. But today, Alan was truly stunned. When the trio looked at him at the same time, Alan suddenly felt nervous. Alan, who had always been friendly with everyone, actually felt nervous at that moment. Back then, Alan's father had pointed at the trio on Stars of Tomorrow in private and told Alan that these three would definitely stand at the top of the business, military and academic worlds in the future. Alan didn't know why his father would give the trio such high praise. He hadn't said anything like this even when the twin stars of Seven Lights appeared, but Alan absolutely believed in his father's judgment. Fortunately, Alan was experienced and quickly adjusted his mentality. Scylla, these three are your roommates. It's an honor to meet you, hee hee. Alan roared in his heart, holy shit, Scylla's roommates are these three big shots. You know all of them? Then I won't introduce them. Yes, yes. It is my honor to have you all here. Alan led the way at the front while thinking that he would have to change his plans later. He would add some high-end dishes later and satisfy these people no matter what. But reality didn't go as Alan wished. When he approached the entrance of Carefree Hall, he heard a group of people talking and laughing inside. Who is that Alan kid going down to pick up? A slightly arrogant and impatient voice asked. I know that kid. I met him on the transport. Scylla had heard this voice on the transport before. What followed was a giggle filled with thick disdain. He's just a guy who lives in a quadruple room and eats at a common restaurant. This was one of the three girls. Then came another wave of laughter. There were all kinds of comments. Alan's vision darkened, and he nearly fell headfirst. Holy shit, I shouldn't have invited them. Also, why didn't he close the door? If you want to say bad things about them, you should at least say it behind closed doors. Bah, even if the door is closed, you can't say it. It was clear that Celine and the other three had heard every word of their conversation. Before Scylla could say anything, Lung had already started shouting, Yo, it looks like someone doesn't welcome us. It looks like everyone here is a big shot. Lung didn't care about Alan's face at all. He said whatever he wanted to say. Alan didn't even have the time to cry now. His mind raced as he tried to think of a way to appease them. Among the few people who were still laughing, a young man stood up as if his buttocks were on fire. His face was red as he stammered, Young Master Long. This person had only seen Lung once when he followed his old man to negotiate. Even his old man had to pay attention to his words and actions in front of Lung. He himself was nothing in front of Lung. None of the people here were idiots. When they saw their companion's reaction, they immediately choked up and stopped joking around. Lung didn't even look at the person who stood up. The sofas were already full, so he just pulled over a chair and sat down. Scylla and the other two sat beside him as well. This way, a strange scene was formed. A dozen or so people were sitting on soft, luxurious sofas, while 4 people were sitting on chairs. Although they seemed to be sitting casually, the aura of these 4 people was too strong. The people sitting on the sofas felt they couldn't even raise their heads in front of these 4 people. It was as if there were nails on the sofas, making them feel uneasy. The thing that broke this strange situation was Pride's arrival. A bodyguard came in first to take a look, and when he saw the 4 people on Scylla's side, he froze for a moment. He was especially surprised when he saw Night. However, this made the bodyguard feel a lot more at ease. Originally, he thought this place would be very mixed up, and would be bad for the young master's growth. But since this person was also here, then they didn't need to worry. The little wimp is here too. Night snorted. The moment he heard Night's voice, Pride, who had walked in with his chin held high and didn't even look anyone in the eye, bristled like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Night, why are you here? If a little wimp like you can come, why can't I? Humph. Pride turned his head away, dragged over a chair and sat down next to him. Although he didn't like Knight, he didn't even want to look at the people on the sofa. By now, even an idiot would know that these people sitting on chairs were not to be trifled with. Otherwise, why would Pride even look at them in the eye? The people sitting on the sofa each had their own thoughts, and didn't say a single word. The way the girls looked at Scylla was different now. Scylla was munching on sunflower seeds at the side, watching the show. Interesting, I'll tell Diaz and the others about today's interesting events later. After Pride sat down, he looked curiously at Ci Jincheng and Lung. He had seen Scylla on the transport vehicle, so he automatically ignored him. These are my roommates, Scylla, Ci Jincheng and Lung. Knight made a simple introduction, then turned around and said to Scylla and the others, this little wimp is called Pride. He only said his name, and nothing else. Pride only snorted in dissatisfaction at Knight calling him a little wimp, but if anyone else had called him that, Pride would definitely have turned hostile. He had no choice, he was defeated by Knight last time, so he could only endure this nickname. Pride gritted his teeth. He would get his revenge sooner or later, and beat this guy until even pigs wouldn't recognize him. I didn't expect you to live in a quadruple room. Pride said disdainfully. Knight spread his hands, it can't be helped, I'm poor, so I can only eat at the canteen's public restaurant, and can only live in a quadruple room that no one else chooses. It was Scylla's friend who coincidentally brought us here today, but we don't seem to be welcome here. Alan's cold sweat poured down like a waterfall. He was wronged. He swore to the heavens that he did not, and would never dare to, have such thoughts. Alan didn't know what to say right now either. These people all had very strange tempers, and right now Alan couldn't figure out what they were thinking either. He could only look at Scylla for help. After receiving Alan's SOS signal, Scylla put down the melon seeds. I'm hungry, Alan, prepare to serve the dishes. Alright, let's serve a few dishes first. Please feel free to order whatever you want to eat. Alan hurriedly passed over a few menus as if he had been liberated. In the end, on one end of the enormous rectangular table were 5 people sitting on chairs eating to their heart's content, while on the other end was a person sitting on a sofa, trembling with fear and cold sweat. In short, the atmosphere of this meal was strange. Knight was the type to finish fights quickly, so Knight had already finished 3 bowls before Pride had even finished his first bowl. However, Scylla and the other 2 weren't slow either. After they finished eating, the 4 of them took their leave. Although Pride ate rather slowly, he didn't have the mood to eat after Knight and the other 3 left. He pushed his bowl away and left. No matter what the remaining people said after they left, Scylla and the other 3 didn't take it to heart. After they returned to the dormitory and tidied up their things, they had a good night's sleep. Early the next morning, Scylla was woken up by Knight. After they finished choosing their classes, they went to the special training room at the school district to spar. According to the rules, students had 2 days to choose their classes after registration. Every dormitory was equipped with a platform, and the subjects were also used on that platform. During breakfast time, the 4 of them finished choosing their classes one after another. Breakfast was made by Lung's household robot, and it was pretty good. The 4 of them placed their breakfast ingredients in the kitchen, and programmed the robot so that it would immediately eat breakfast after waking up. After breakfast, the 4 of them sat on Lung's flying car and headed to the training room at the school district. After all, the dormitory's training room was too small, and they could only do some simple training. If they wanted to fight freely, they could only go to the training room at the school district. There was more space there, and there were all kinds of training modes. There weren't many people using the training room today, so Scylla used Ci Jincheng's orange card to choose a spare medium-sized training room. This was because Scylla and the other 2's red cards could only choose a small training room. Logically speaking, a small training room was only needed for a 2-man battle, but Knight felt that it was still too small, so he chose a medium-sized one. There were only Scylla and the other 3 inside the medium-sized training room. Ci Jincheng and Lung were watching from the quarantine area on the side, while Silen and Knight were doing warm-up exercises inside. They were digesting the breakfast they just ate. Their jackets were also left in the quarantine area, so that they wouldn't get caught in the crossfire. "Are you done?" Knight asked. "Yes, let's begin." Chapter 28. When Knight asked the question, his knees were slightly bent and he placed his center of gravity on the tip of his toes. He clenched his fists in front of him, ready to fight at any moment. Silen raised his leg and took a step sideways. He spread his arms wide and placed them seemingly casually at his sides, but it looked like they were full of openings. When he finished saying, "Let's begin," the emotions in Silen's eyes gradually settled down. There was not a trace of emotion in them, a stark contrast to the intense battle intent in Knight's eyes. His former instructor said that he could determine the opponent's next move from the look in their eyes, but Knight could only see calmness in Silen's eyes. A calmness that was as deep as the abyss. Knight had seen calmness in many people's eyes, but those people were senior instructors or people like his own father. Knight had never seen such calmness among his peers. This Silen gave Knight a very strange feeling. It was as if he was a quiet hunter waiting for his prey to fall into his net. Prey. Knight was amused by his own thoughts. Who's the hunter and who's the prey? We'll talk after we fight. Bam! Making the first move, Knight's figure instantly vanished from where he stood. The air where he stood let out a loud bang due to the instantaneous compression and collision. Knight rushed forward and his fist tightened the moment it reached Silen's face. His speed was several times faster than before, and his strength was at its peak at this moment. Just when Knight thought he was about to hit Silen, he felt his elbow sink. It was pulled away from its target as if it had entered a whirlpool. At the same time, Silen's other hand passed through the gap and attacked Knight's neck. Knight raised his hand to block it. Instead of retreating, he took a step forward and punched at Silen's face again. This time, the speed of the punch was much faster. Silen could hear the friction between Knight's fist and the air, the kind that carried a crackling sound. Silen dodged and moved away. He twisted his body and moved forward at the same time. A head-on confrontation. No, that's not it. That strange whirlpool-like force appeared once more and sucked Knight's fist away from its original line of attack, gluing it to Knight's fist. This time, Knight clearly saw the source of that strange force. It was the whirlpool formed by the movements of Silen's palm and even his entire arm. Using softness to overcome hardness. When Knight was training in the past, both his instructor and his father had told him about using softness to overcome hardness. Since almost everyone in the Fiegler family was the hard and fierce type, Knight had learned many ways to deal with it so that he would not be at a disadvantage in the future. However, the one he liked the most was to add hardness to hardness, absolute hardness. Although he had this thought in his mind, the movements of his hands were definitely not slow. His knife hand went straight for Silen's throat. In the next moment, the palm that was blocked did not completely retract. Instead, it quickly flipped over and struck Silen's chest. He did not stop for even a moment, and his speed was still increasing. His eyes, ears, neck, throat, ribs, stomach, shins, tailbone. Every time he struck, he aimed at his target, but he would always be glued to the wall, the floor, and the ceiling by the cyclone. Up until now, Silen hadn't actually attacked much. He was mostly defending. Every time he fought against a different opponent, he would always first observe his opponent's fundamentals and combat style. As he dealt with and neutralized his opponent's attacks, he would also improve on his own shortcomings and learn new techniques. Silen had never seen Knight's fist style before. Although he could deal with it now, Silen knew that Knight was changing step by step. At first, Silen could still lead Knight's fists to a certain direction, but slowly, the attacks of the fists grew fiercer and faster. The power of the whirlpool could no longer control the attacks, and could only fling them away. This meant that Knight was slowly reaching the limits of this whirlpool. Banging sounds rang out continuously in the training room. The walls, floor, and ceiling were all starting to cave in. It was obvious just how powerful the punches were to be able to make a dent in the specially made walls and ceiling of the training room. Ci Jincheng and Lung sighed in their hearts as they felt the tremors in the training room from the quarantine area. Isn't this too powerful? Jincheng, is Silen's genotype really only B rank? Ci Jincheng nodded. Silen's enrollment profile showed that his genotype was B rank, but Knight was an actual A rank genotype. An A rank genotype against a B rank genotype with such fierce firepower right off the bat. Moreover, Silen was still able to defend against Knight's attacks even now. To be more precise, Silen was taking advantage of the momentum and luring his opponent to miss. Looking at the shaking training room, Lung sighed, those people from the management department are probably starting to pay attention. It would be weird if they didn't notice such a huge commotion. It was just that the four of them had turned off all the monitors in the training room when they came in, but there was no way that the people from the management department wouldn't have a backup plan, right? Ci Jincheng did not say anything. He took out a finger-sized device and pressed it. Many small probes and pinhole cameras appeared at the bottom, walls, and ceiling of the training room. There were also a few places where the surveillance equipment was merged with the wall. At first glance, there was nothing special about this place at all. At the same time, everything related to this training room on the monitors in the management department was blank. Even the records had been erased. Check the card reader in that training room. A person from the management department said. Found it. He didn't erase this card reader record. The card reader's name is Ci Jincheng. His surname is Ci. The person thought for a moment, never mind, don't bother with that training room. As long as they don't destroy the training room, let them do whatever they want. Because the commotion in Silen's training room was too big, the people who were originally training in the surrounding training rooms all came out of curiosity to see what was going on. Who was so awesome as to cause such a commotion? The few training rooms nearby could clearly feel the tremors. The group of people followed the sound and arrived in front of the training room. The room door was tightly shut, and it was still in no spectators allowed mode. They could not enter, so they could only gather in front of the door and discuss. People came over one after another to join the discussion circle. Neither Silen nor Knight had the heart to think about the reactions outside. The two of them fought faster and faster. They could still see afterimages before, but now they couldn't even catch a glimpse of them. Instead, fleeting bolts of lightning began to appear clearly. The Fiegler family's thunderstorm fist. Ci Jincheng said while looking at those bolts of lightning. I've heard of your name for a long time, but I've never seen it with my own eyes. Lung had only seen it in videos on electronic magazines before, but those were just blurry images. Normal magazines did not dare to analyze too much about things related to the military. Right now, Silen, who was defending against Knight's attacks in the field, could clearly feel the air around him beginning to stir restlessly. Some of the particles were starting to fission and release energy. And these changes were all caused by Knight. They were as dense as a rainstorm, carrying with them the momentum of a thunderbolt. Every time Knight punched out, there would be a flash of lightning, and the sound of crackling could be heard continuously. This wasn't fancy, it was real lightning. Silen could already feel the numbness from touching those tiny particles on his skin. It felt like he was inside an electric field, and the electric field was still strengthening. The number of fission particles increased, and the numbness grew stronger with every movement. Silen could even smell the burnt smell of his clothes burning. He definitely wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer if this continued. Meanwhile, the bulging veins on Knight's arms and the speed of his punches were starting to slow down, showing that his strength was about to reach its peak. Bam! Silen used the force to fly a few steps back. Knight, who was pressing forward, noticed that Silen's arms shook and scattered the original cyclone. What replaced it was an aura that was completely different from before. It was unfathomable, immeasurable, and even suffocating. At this moment, the restless particles around Silen's body began to calm down. This is the real you, isn't it? While he was thinking, Knight's feet pushed off the ground again, and the momentum of his charge rose to its peak. The crackling lightning seemed like it was going to tear through space itself. Scylla did not dodge Knight's attack, nor did he use his previous method of making it miss. Instead, he faced it head-on. He stood there, stretched out his fist, and met it head-on. Bang! Bang! These two sounds rang out almost at the same time. The recoil from the collision of the two fists sent Scylla and Knight flying towards the walls on both sides. The students who were having a heated discussion outside the training room became deathly silent at this moment, because they saw that a human-shaped protrusion had been smashed into the wall. These students were very familiar with the resistance of the wall after training in the training room for such a long time. If they wanted to leave a footprint on the wall, they probably wouldn't even be able to break their bones. But what was going on in front of them? Ci Jincheng and Lung's eyelids twitched as they watched. Fortunately, these two were not sent flying towards the quarantine area, or the quarantine layer would have been smashed as well. Knight was very strong. Ci Jincheng and Lung knew this a long time ago. As someone from the same generation as them, even if they were in different fields, they would often hear high praises from their seniors. But what about Scylla? Since when did the Duance family produce such a monster? How could a person who could fight Knight to a draw be an unknown person? He was like a star that had always been hidden in the darkness, watching the world quietly and then displaying his astounding brilliance in a place no one knew about. But no matter what, this star would soon appear before everyone's eyes. Since he had walked out of the darkness, his dazzling light could no longer be concealed. Chapter 29. Both Scylla and Knight were embedded into the two opposite walls of the training room. Scylla landed on the ground from the wall, moved his arms and shrugged his shoulders. The crisp sound of bones cracking could be clearly heard every time he moved. On the other side, Knight's situation was almost the same. Ha, this is so good. This is the first time I've had such a good fight since I came to Seven Lights. Knight laughed quite happily. Ci Jincheng and Lung's faces twitched as they watched the duo's performance in the field from the quarantine area. These two were actually born with the zodiac sign of King Kong, weren't they? Both of them had smashed into a human shape on the wall. They crawled up and shook themselves, but they were completely fine. Scylla looked at the clothes on his body. There were a few spots that were obviously charred black. It was fortunate that he had brought a change of clothes for the sake of insurance. The training room did not have an individual changing room, and they were all men anyway. What was there to be shy about? They could just strip off their clothes and change. While Scylla and Knightley were changing their clothes, Lon picked up the mini camera and snapped pictures. Hee hee, next time I'll put your changing pictures up for auction on Seven Lights website. Lung, do you want to stick a picture on the wall too? Knight pointed at the two human-shaped depressions on the wall with his chin. Sigh, we're roommates after all. If worst comes to worst, I'll give you half of the profit. Speaking of which, Scylla, are you really a rank B genotype? A lot of rank A genotypes can't compare to you. He sure was quick to change the topic, but Knight was indeed led away by the topic. True. At the end, I felt like I had crashed into an armored car. Knight swung his arms and said. In truth, Scylla hadn't used much strength when he slapped the two flying cars down, right? Otherwise, he wouldn't have slapped them to that extent. Scylla smiled, it's because of my constitution. You should enter the military with that constitution of yours. I guarantee that you'll rise quickly. Pride's second brother Ji Feihang is a good example. Back when he was a recruit, he single-handedly challenged an entire class. My dad called it an A+ constitution, and the reason for this phenomenon might be hybrid advantage. Hybrid advantage, indeed, just from the names of Pride and his second brother, one could tell that their parents were not of the same race. Of the two sons, one was named after their father and the other after their mother. But, Knight continued, I know of some people whose parents are not of the same race, but their genotype is only rank B, which is a far cry from their parents' rank A genotype. Of course, I don't know about your situation, Sillin. I don't know about the Duance family situation either. Knight was in a good mood right now, so he was especially talkative. Lung narrowed his eyes and rubbed his chin. If that's the case, wouldn't our child have a higher chance of being A+ genotype if I find a woman from another galaxy? C.I. Jincheng looked thoughtful. There are indeed people who have researched this before. Some people think that the further the parents are from each other, the higher the chances of their children being genetically superior. All right. Lung clapped. I'll find a woman from another galaxy to be my wife in the future. You've decided to stay clean? Sillin asked in disbelief. That's two different things. The wife is from another galaxy, but the lover doesn't have many requirements. Tisk. The three of them looked at him in disdain. Sillin would never tell anyone the truth about his physique. The chip integrated into his body was his biggest secret. Outside the training room, a group of students were discussing whether the person inside was an instructor or an upper-grade student when the door to the training room opened. The discussion immediately stopped. Sillin and the other three walked out one after another. Sillin and the other three only swept a glance at the students gathered outside the training room before walking straight towards the exit. Who are those for? They don't have student badges, so I don't know which year they are. It's that guy. Some of the upper-grade students recognized Lung. Lung's name spread very quickly among the upper-grade students, because this young master of the Andryra family was the one who interacted the most with the upper-grade students who set up stalls at the trade area during this period of time. So he's this year's first-grade students? That's way too fierce. Someone looked at the human-shaped protrusion that had smashed into the training room's wall and gulped. Not even the 5th, 6th or 7th grade students who specialized in military affairs could have such destructive power, could they? Not far away, a couple of 3rd grade students were leaning on the railing and withdrawing their gazes from Sillin and the other three. Fiegler Knight? I didn't expect that guy to come to Seven Lights. Didn't he always look down on all academies other than the military academies? A young man wearing an ear stud said. His voice was thick with sarcasm. Oh. You know them, Stuart. Which one is Knight? The person beside him asked curiously. The ear-stud young man called Stuart did not say anything. He seemed to not want to talk about it. At the same time, two girls were also having a discussion on a teaching building slightly further away from here. There was a long-distance viewing device placed in front of them. Sister Fu Luo, who do you think was fighting inside just now? The girl who spoke looked a little younger. She blinked her big eyes, and her voice carried a hint of playfulness. When she smiled, two little dimples would appear on her cheeks, making her look very cute. What do you think? The girl called Fu Luo only smiled faintly, elegant and fresh. The younger girl held her chin and pointed at Knight on the screen. This guy must be one of them. That battle aura hasn't died down yet. She then pointed at C.I. Jincheng. This guy definitely didn't fight. As for the other two guys. Her big eyes swept between Lung and Sillin before she pointed at Sillin. This guy has a higher chance of fighting. I think so too. But why do they look completely fine after crashing into the walls of the training room like that? Fu Luo stared at the ruby-like flying car that rose into the sky and flew into the distance with a complicated look in her eyes. She had a feeling that the coming days of Seven Lights would not be peaceful. After Sillin returned to the accommodation, he took a good bath, ate the fast food the robot prepared and shut his door to sleep. He needed to analyze today's battle in detail in that state. During his sleep, every step of his sparring session with Knight replayed clearly in his mind. Knight's every movement, the contraction and contraction of every muscle, the minute changes in the surrounding air, the fission of particles, the generation of electricity, everything began to play in slow motion in high definition. However, Sillin's sleep did not last too long. At least he woke up the next morning. He looked at the time display on the bedside, scratched his head and went downstairs to wash up. The smell of breakfast was already coming from downstairs. Just as he went downstairs, he saw Lung swinging his legs while shouting at the teacher information display on the hostel's teaching platform. "Look, this teacher's eyes are so pretty. They look like shit. Silen. Are you praising or insulting me?" C.I. Jincheng, who was eating his breakfast and spreading mayonnaise on his bread, paused when he heard this. He frowned at the mayonnaise on the bread and suddenly lost his appetite. Silen did not care that much. He needed to replenish his energy after exhausting his brain power. After asking the robot to make him 5 portions of the same breakfast, he picked up the ham bread on the table and took a bite. "Where's Night?" Lung raised his hand and pointed upwards. "He's fixing that wireless jammer or something on the roof." "Oh right, Silen, we can use our internet now. Jincheng installed something so that the people from the management department can't find our real information. This also means that we don't have to worry about being caught and having our credits deducted even if we curse the headmaster on 7 lights. It's not just 7 lights. The internet of Sector B's University Alliance will work as well." C.I. Jincheng said affirmatively. "That's great. I had a flash of inspiration yesterday and compiled a love letter. I'm going to send it to all the beauties of Sector B's universities." Lung took out his tablet excitedly. Silen and C.I. Jincheng moved closer to see just what kind of touching confession it was. The words on the tablet were, "You are that fire. The moment you appeared, all the blood in my body began to boil my soul and boil for you. That heat that seeped deep into my bones made me willing to search for you in all the carnations in the galaxy. I was not willing to stop for anyone else." Silen and C.I. Jincheng were sweating profusely. Leaving aside the horrifying words of all the blood in his body cooking his soul, what the hell was up with that carnation? The duo pointed at the word carnation on the tablet that was rendered in pink and crimson tones and looked towards Lung. Isn't carnation a symbol of burning love?" Lung opened his eyes wide with an innocent look on his face. "Then what does a red rose symbolize?" Silen asked again. Lung said with an expression that even a child would know this, "Of course I know this. It's a curse." Silen and C.I. Jincheng. "Curse my ass." Night, who was walking down the stairs after installing the jammer and about to show off, was so shocked that he nearly fell down the stairs. Every day, every day, every day. "Young master, even if you're writing a love letter, you can't just use flowery words carelessly." Silen and the others finally deeply understood what was missing in this young master's brain. Chapter 30. On the day of the freshmen's opening ceremony, Silen's quartet sat a few rows at the back of the auditorium. Silen was sleeping on his chair, Night was playing with the tank model in his hands, C.I. Jincheng was reading a book, and Lung was looking left and right at the beauties. In short, none of the quartet paid attention to the speech of the freshman representative and 7 lights higher-ups at the center stage. In reality, there were a lot of students like them. However, Silen suddenly heard a familiar voice in his sleep state. He woke up from his slumber and opened his eyes to look at the center stage. As expected, it was a familiar face. The speaker was one of the vice headmasters of 7 Lights, the head of the scientific research department, Mo Heng. He was also the old man Silen met at the train station at the trade zone. When Silen looked over, the speaking Mo Heng suddenly noticed Silen's gaze. After a moment of blankness, a rather meaningful smile appeared on Mo Heng's face. Vice Headmaster Ting, who was sitting next to Mo Heng and thinking about what to eat for lunch, suddenly shivered. He looked up and saw Mo Heng's strange smile. To those who did not know Mo Heng, the smile looked amiable, but those who did know Mo Heng knew that this old man must be up to something again. Silen suddenly felt a chill run down his spine. What on earth was this vice headmaster trying to do? Silen's quartet left impatiently when the opening ceremony was finally over. They were really bored to death sitting there. After the opening ceremony, it was time for class to officially begin. 7 Lights offered a lot of courses, and they were divided into major categories: literature, economics, theory, engineering, military, and so on. There were no other restrictions such as category restrictions aside from rank restrictions. However, if a student chose a course but failed the exam in the end, then apologies, not only would their credits not increase, they would even be deducted. Therefore, normally, students would choose a major that they were familiar with. They would be able to advance as long as they had enough credits. If they could not meet the minimum requirements, they would have to repeat a year, and if they could not advance in 3 years, they would be forced to drop out of school. However, if they could obtain enough credits, they could apply to advance in advance. The military was what the male students yearned for the most, but it was also the hardest to obtain credits. Therefore, if one wanted to choose the military, they had to first weigh themselves. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret it even if they lost themselves. Of course, it was impossible for the academy to stifle the enthusiasm of the students. Each major category had its own elective courses. Those who were interested in that category but were not sure if they could get all the credits could choose the elective courses. The credits for the elective courses were only 1/10 of the credits for the original courses, but they were easy to get, and the teachers were not strict, so they were quite popular among the students. C.I. Jincheng had chosen some courses under the general category of literature. Since he was a specially enrolled student, there were other standards. Lung mainly chose economics, but he also chose literature as an elective because there were many beauties there. In his words, he was going there to wash his eyes. Without a doubt, Knight chose the military category. He wasn't interested in anything else. As for Silin, he had chosen a few courses under each major, and none of them were electives. As long as their schedules didn't clash and they were within class time, he would choose them all. It could be said that Silin's daily schedule was relatively full. Of course, weekends didn't count. Weekends were a time for rest and recuperation. Due to the different courses they chose, the chances of the 4 of them meeting each other during the day was much lesser. Silin bought another hoverboard. After all, he couldn't always count on Lung's flying car, and everyone's class schedule was different. Specially enrolled students like C.I. Jincheng often stayed over at the research division, while Knight often stayed over at the training division. After all, it was more convenient there. Lung would drive his flying car to the trade area every day after class to tease the higher grade students, causing everyone in the trade area to want nothing more than to run away from Lung the moment they saw him. Therefore, in this way, only Silin was a permanent resident of the dormitory. But that was fine, it made it more convenient for Silin to handle some matters. That Boston creeper wrapped in ecological film was going to stick up if it wasn't dealt with soon. On the first weekend of the semester, Silin was the only one in the dormitory. Silin took out a clean tray from inside his room, tore open the ecological film and placed the vine on top. The surrounding nutrient solution didn't seem to be of much help to it, the green color of the leaf appeared dim and weak. Silin placed his finger on the leaf and closed his eyes, feeling the information transmitted from his finger. The division of every cell on the leaf, the different components within the cells, the interpretation of genetic information. The relevant information and data flashed through his mind, and the biochip integrated into the chromosomes in Silin's body analyzed everything it came into contact with like a precise instrument. Silin had a very strange feeling. It was different from those lifeless things. This kind of pulsating liveliness gave Silin the urge to communicate with it. Silin seemed to have found this vine's life code. If he could decipher this code, he would be able to understand this plant's survival conditions. More specifically, he would be able to know what this plant needed the most right now. Silin could clearly sense what this vine was yearning for, and at the same time, he could also sense its weakness and unease. Thoughts? That's right, that's their thoughts. Silin remembered Jenya's words very clearly. Back then, Jenya had told Silin while sitting under the Fuji tree, there are very few people who truly care about the lives of plants, but in reality, they desire to communicate more than anything. The resonance of life is much easier to win their favor than a rigid machine. Of course, Jenya's words were actually based on the Fuji tree. Fuji trees were considered superior in the world of plants, or else they wouldn't have been called upper tree Fuji. Genya had also said that the higher the grade, the clearer their thoughts. They were like a species between plant and animal, with the form of a plant and the thoughts of an animal. From the looks of it, this mutated Boston creeper was actually an evolved species. Sillin could accurately contact that kind of clear thoughts. His thoughts were transmitted through the biochip in his body to the leaf, and Sillin expressed his kindness. This vine was like a child that had just left its mother's womb. After coming into contact with Sillin's kindness, it felt a long-lost sense of security and transmitted its thoughts. Sillin picked up the tray, looked at the vine on the tray and said quietly, "Don't worry, I'm right here, right next to you." Before he left, Sillin installed a button. This was set by Ci Jincheng, so when it was activated, the people outside would see the scene inside as preset, and would not be able to see the true changes that were happening in the courtyard. On the ground directly below the window of Sillin's bedroom, Sillin chiseled away the foundation surface of the house and exposed the soil underneath. He put the vine down and sprinkled some normal nutrient solution on it, and the vine began to change at a speed visible to the naked eye. The color of the leaf began to become full of life, and the vine began to grow and extend, climbing up 1 foot after another. At the same time, when it reached a certain height, both sides of the vine began to grow more and more branches. Sillin sat on the lawn and watched it grow, extending into the surroundings step by step. In reality, they were very easy to raise, and they didn't have high requirements for their environment. It wasn't that they didn't want to absorb those nutrients before, but that this child that had left its mother's body was too vigilant. If their vigilance wasn't quelled, they would rather wither and return to the dust than accept the relief that was delivered to them. The instruments inside Seven Lights Research Zone's Institute of Botany could analyze this plant's genetic code and related traits in detail, but they couldn't communicate with this plant. This was the difference between a machine and a living being. The wonder of life was that it couldn't be explained with words, but one could clearly feel that living existence. At dusk, Sillin looked at the plant that had already covered most of the dormitory's surface and smiled. Those 3 fellows would probably be shocked when they returned, wouldn't they? Chapter 31. Speaking of which, not even 2 days after Sillin had planted the Bigfoot Boston ivy, Lung nearly charged straight into the hostel when he drove his flying car into the hostel's courtyard. He hurriedly stopped the flying car and circled around the hostel a couple of times, staring left and right at the Boston ivy and clicking his tongue in wonder. "Sillin, you have to sell me the method to cultivate this plant," Lung said with shining eyes. Sillin shook his head. "There's nothing special about the growing conditions for this plant, and I used a normal nutrient solution that costs 100 star coins a bottle, and I only used 1 bottle." "Bullshit. Even if you only used a bottle of normal nutrition fluid, there must be some special method behind it. Otherwise, why wouldn't those people from the research division be able to figure it out after so long?" Lung said as he fiddled with the leaves of a creeper climbing on the dormitory's wall. This plant was growing really well. Spreading his hands, Sillin indicated that he had no idea either. This plant might need to be appeased. Lung had a doubtful look on his face, but then he smiled. That's really possible. There were some things that didn't need to be said. They were all smart people, and who didn't have secrets that they couldn't share. However, Lung really did take Sillin's words to heart. Sillin wouldn't speak without thinking, and it was fine to fool others, but he wouldn't do that to himself, because Sillin had long since promised to sell the method to Lung first. Actually, back then, Sillin hadn't expected that the growing conditions for this plant would actually be like this. If it was just a combination of nutrient solution, then so be it. Sillin could really sell the recipe that way, but this method, seeing Lung flip the leaves, Sillin continued. A child that has just been forcibly separated from its mother, forced to eat by a knife-wielding stranger, even if it opens its mouth to eat, how can it grow well? Not to mention those with a more unyielding temperament. Lung deeply agreed. Makes sense. And the subsequent developments clearly proved Sillin's words. This plant would be exposed to the public sooner or later, so when Silen simply removed the screen settings, news of this mutated B.C. ivy was quickly made known to the research division. The answer Silen Helong gave was very simple: he didn't know. The people from the research division's botany department suspiciously pruned this B.C. ivy and moved it to the research division for cultivation, and after 2 days of careful care, it died. Instrument tests also showed that the one in Silen's dormitory was no different from the sample from the research division, and the soil analysis was also inconclusive. It was just as Silen said, it only had the 100 star coins of normal nutrient solution. It was at this moment that the person who had sampled from the planet where the mother plant grew had returned with a small but intact Boston ivy. After much care, the small Boston ivy had finally managed to survive, but it was obvious that its growth was nowhere near as good as Silen's. But this was the matter for the people from the botany department, and Silen. Silen and Silen of. This period of Silen's military training could be considered the initial phase of the course, and he was only active in the teaching area. Every class was focused on training his physique. If his physique couldn't be improved, then he would be looking for a beating at the training area. Only after improving their physique would they be allowed to go to the training division for the next step of their training. It was a rare sight to see Knight, who had skipped class 3 times. This fellow was still standing there with a stern face as if he was unwilling to leave. The instructor directly ignored him. Everyone knew who this guy was anyway. They were also clear about his abilities. Just let him be. This training class is to run 100 kilograms of weights around the field. The passing line is 10 laps. After 15 laps, you can proceed to the next step of training. You don't need to run with weights in the next few classes. If you can run 20 laps, you can go directly to the training area and don't waste your time here. The instructor spoke in a very relaxed tone, but upon hearing these words, many of the students gasped. Each lap of the field was 1 kilometer, and 10 laps would be 10 kilometers. Wouldn't it be tiring to carry 100 kilograms of weight? Silen tied 25 kilograms of weights to his arms and legs. After some thought, he added 50 kilograms to his back. Otherwise, it wouldn't have much effect on improving his physique. Knight was instantly delighted when he saw this. Silen, you're a man. As he said this, he also added 50 kilograms to his back. Originally, he had wanted to finish running earlier and go to the training division, but adding a bit of challenge wasn't bad either. Nearby, the instructors and adjutants became interested in Silen after seeing this. Although Silen's performance wasn't bad the previous 3 times, he had stopped after reaching the standard. They wondered if running with Knight today would force out this kid's ability. Everyone knew that they had to maintain their pace, but when so many people started running at the same time, their competitive spirit rose, and their minds heated up. Some of them began to panic. Their speed at the beginning exceeded their original plan, and the effect was a chain reaction. When the people at the back saw that they were about to be left behind, they also increased their speed. Not far away, the instructors sat there leisurely chatting. One of them pointed at the running students and said, "Most of these guys are B rank genotypes, but they can't even compare to the military's C rank. They're a pure waste of genetic resources. That's why I said they need to be fucked. Even if we don't hold them to military school standards, we still can't ruin our reputation. After all, people like us who are sent to non-military academies have our names in the League of Stars military headquarters. If these guys go out and get knocked down by people from other academies, we'll lose a lot of face when we return to the League of Stars military. That's why I asked Boss Hua to force that kid Knight over. It's all for this lesson to give these arrogant guys a beating." "Hee, you don't say. That kid Knight is really not bad." "Of course. Don't you know who his father is? How can he be a weakling?" While the instructors were chatting, the jogging Silen and Knight were also chatting. The two of them were running at the front of the group. Knight was bored, so he pulled Silen along as they ran. This caused the people around them to look at the two of them like rare animals. They were actually chatting while running with weights. The two of them did not pay any attention to their breathing rhythm at all. It felt no different from walking and chatting. Fuck, you'll regret it in 2 laps. Some people thought. Silen knew that Knight was very impatient when he came to class, but he still underestimated Knight's resentment. Tonight, this kind of class was a pure waste of time. Then why are you here today? I don't have a choice. We have to swipe our cards to sign in, and the number of people who show up will be counted in the final score. Uncle Hua. The head of the training department, he said he could help with this, but he asked me to come here once in a while. Oh right, how's the ivy in our dormitory looking? I heard that the people from the Institute of Botany are so conflicted that their hair is about to fall off. When Silen sent the image of the ivy to Ci Jinchang and Knight, everyone was shocked. It's alright. The people from the research department came over to collect soil again yesterday. TSK, I despise them to the extreme. Those guys are so stubborn. And so, the two of them talked from the Ivy to the training department's senior year training, and then to the military academy's training. It sounded like it was completely incomparable to the training here. No wonder Knight looked down on the people around him who complained about being tired so much. The two of them did not care about the other students running speed as they chatted, and before they knew it, the two of them had started to take the lead. The students who were panting behind them looked at the two of them chatting casually, and sincerely wondered if their weights were bubbles. That kid Silen, he's not bad. The instructor pointed to the other side. It's the 7th lap, and he's still fine. He's someone who carries 150 kilograms like Knight. And his genotype is only B rank. He's a good seedling. Silen and Knight only talked as they ran, completely ignoring the people behind them. Knight did not even keep track of the number of laps, he always stopped when he reached his limit in the past. Slowly, they left the people behind them more than 1 lap behind, and some of the weaker ones were left more than 3 laps behind. It's been 10 laps, right? Silen asked. Sigh, who cares? Let's chat some more, where were we? Alright, let's chat some more. Report to the training department directly after you finish 20 laps. Haha, how loyal. Knight reached out and patted Silen's shoulder. He was very satisfied with Silen's explanation. Then, he continued to talk about the situation at the training division. Knight grew even more excited when he talked about Pride making a fool of himself over there. He was happy to see Pride making a fool of himself. And so, Knight's laughter could be heard in the huge field. Oh my god, you don't know the look on that kid's face at the time, I was dying of laughter, haha. The students who were clenching their teeth and persisting in running on the field blacked out, wishing they could pass out. Was this guy going to let them live? He was still in the mood to joke. His laughter was still so sonorous and forceful after running so many laps, how could they endure it? Some of the students felt that those two had just run past them, and not long after, they brushed past them again, and then again, and again. When Silen and Knight finished running 20 laps, a few students were still continuing. They hadn't even finished 10 laps, and the instructor had just shouted that they had to finish these 10 laps even if they had to crawl, or their credits would be deducted. Comparisons were odious. That was what the students were thinking at the moment. A few of them personally checked the weights of Silen and Knight after they finished running, and the weights were solid, and they were even over the limit. Those who usually boasted that they weren't bad wanted to vomit blood. After running 20 laps, Knight pulled Silen in front of the instructor and gave him a formal salute, then said proudly, "See, my brother, not bad, right? A brother from the same dormitory. Instructor, you must keep your word, we won't come here next time, we'll train directly at the training department." After running 20 laps, Knight and Silen were only a little out of breath, but their spirits were still very good, and it looked like they would recover in no time. The instructor did not mind Knight's tone towards them. Besides, this wasn't a real army, and with this kid's bad temper, it was already giving them face by saluting and calling them instructor. Waving his hand, the instructor said with a smile, go on, keep working hard when you're there." After the two of them walked far away, the adjutant on the side said, "I've long heard from the security team that kid called Silen looks unremarkable, but he really hides it well. His stamina is definitely on par with Knight." Chapter 32. Naturally, Silen was happy to be able to go directly to the training division for training. But this also brought about a problem. There would be a class conflict because the training division's time was completely different from the military class here. Moreover, it would take more than half an hour of flight time to take a direct bus from the teaching area to the training division. Silen did not have Knight's privilege and could only choose to skip a few classes. As long as he didn't skip too many, he should be able to pass the final exam. If it wasn't for the fact that attendance was tied to credits, Silen could have skipped many classes. He would only need to look through them once to understand them, and even if he went, he would only sleep. Only when he encountered some in-depth and interesting things would Silen perk up and listen. After all, there weren't many in-depth things in the first grade classes. The sooner he obtained enough credits, the sooner he could apply for the higher grade classes. The training division's shooting range. The students were practicing shooting 100 bullets at a high-speed moving target. In the end, the one with the highest hit rate was Knight, 100%. The second was Pride. He was also 100%, but he used 2 seconds more than Knight. In third place was Silen, with a hit rate of 99%. At first, Silen's results surprised everyone, but everyone got used to it later on. During the few shooting practices, Silen would always miss 1 or 2 shots and settle for third place. What a dark horse. Although he can't compare to Knight and Pride, he's not worse than some of the higher grade students. The person tallying the scores said. It's a bit of a pity. That kid Silen missed another shot. If he didn't miss that shot, he might be able to fight for second place with Pride. Another person also said. Juanil frowned and said nothing. He would personally come to watch the two little devils Knight and Pride's class, in case he couldn't explain to the military if something went wrong. But after every shooting lesson, Juanil couldn't help but feel that there was something wrong with that kid Silen, but he couldn't put his finger on it. After shooting, Silen put away his gun and turned to leave. Just then, Pride was also walking towards the door. When he saw Silen, he raised his chin and said, "Yo, the eternal third. Nobody wants to compete with you on who can lift their chin higher. Hurry up and fuck off, you little brat who can even choke on a fish." Knight said disdainfully as he walked over from behind Pride. It was obvious that Knight's words had stabbed Pride's sore spot. Pride had publicized the incident where he got stuck while eating fish to become a laughing stock. Pride glared angrily at the two of them before he snorted and left with his chin raised. Knight curled his lips at Pride's back. "Ignore that brat. Come, let's go have a drink." The food at the training division isn't bad. You don't know, back in the military academy, we weren't allowed to drink. We were so hungry. In truth, Silen didn't care about being third at all. He could guarantee that he would hit all the shots in half the time Knight took. But this would undoubtedly bring a lot of suspicion and trouble. Silen didn't want to be too conspicuous. He was happy to enjoy the benefits of being in the top 3. Everything else should be done in moderation. The courses at the training area were divided into many categories. Other than shooting, there were military theory, military geography, tactical coordination, and piloting skills of warships, airplanes, armored vehicles and so on. Silen had learned quite a bit from them. But these days wouldn't last long. Today, Silen skipped his classes at the teaching area and sat on the direct passenger flying car from the academy's teaching area to the training area. The flying car suddenly stopped not long after it took off. It seemed that the fight between two students had caused some problems in the flying car's energy system. Silen looked at the time. The flying car's energy system repair would probably take half an hour, but he could still make it for the classes over there. "Let's take a nap first." Silen could vaguely hear a conversation not far away. "I'm so lucky today. Thank you, Elder Mo, you've worked hard. Moreover, Silen also sensed that someone was looking in his direction. He opened his eyes and turned to look. Celine regretted it the moment he saw it. It really is you, kid. You actually dared to skip class. The person was Mo Hung. Hello, Headmaster Mo. The corner of Silen's mouth twitched. No matter how he looked at it, the smile on Mo Hung's face sent a chill down his spine. Mo Hung ignored the driver and the others. He narrowed his eyes and took steady steps as he said leisurely, you should be taking an engineering class at this time, right? Mechanical construction class. Fine, you've actually been paying attention to me for a long time, haven't you? You even told me what class I'm taking. How am I supposed to argue? He looked at Silen's backpack. Are we going to the training division? Yeah, you're not allowed to go. Come with me. I have something to tell you. After taking 2 steps, Mo Hung turned around and saw that Silen wasn't moving. He raised his grizzled eyebrows. Hurry up. What are you dawdling for? You're wasting the other passengers' time. Silen braced himself and followed Mo Hung out of the passenger flying car. Headmaster Mo. The training division still had a shooting class today. This would be included in their usual scores. Mo Hung raised a hand to stop Silen's words. He dialed the communicator in front of Silen, and the call was connected almost immediately. Huanil's image was displayed on the screen. Little Nail, I'm taking Silen with me. Yes. Take him with you. The answer was very powerful. It was clean, decisive, and without the slightest hesitation. Silen. After the call ended, Mo Hung sat in his private car and hooked his finger at Silen smugly. Good boy, come with this old man. Mo Hung had left this way because he had something to attend to at the last minute. He didn't expect to run into a passenger flying car with a malfunctioning energy system, so he lent a hand in passing and shortened the repair time that should have taken half an hour to 5 minutes. It was also thanks to this coincidence that Mo Hung caught the skipping class Silen. Silen sat in Mo Hung's private car and arrived at the research division's mechanical engineering division. With Mo Hung's guidance, Silen entered the building almost unimpeded. Mo Hung tossed him a set of work clothes. Change into it and come with me. Although he didn't know what Mo Hung was planning, Silen still did as he was told. He followed Mo Hung into a workshop. Scattered parts were scattered all over the place. I'll give you half an hour to assemble a complete mechanical object. If you don't pass the inspection, you'll be disqualified. If you don't pass, you won't be leaving today. You'll get a 0 in your mechanical engineering course. Mo Hung closed the door and locked it. Silen looked at the tightly shut steel door and scratched his head. After letting out a sigh, he looked towards the workshop. Silen could tell which parts could be assembled with just a glance. But there would always be a few missing parts if he wanted to assemble a fully functional mechanical body. Silen didn't start assembling immediately. Instead, he quickly categorized the parts and memorized where each part was used to form the mechanical body. Just like that, the mechanical blueprints gradually became complete in Silen's mind as he categorized the parts. Mo Hung gave him 30 minutes, but there were too many parts in this workshop. It took him 20 minutes just to categorize them. The remaining 10 minutes should be enough. Among the 7 piles of parts, there were only 2 that could be assembled completely. Silen chose the slightly simpler pile and began to assemble it. Mo Hung sat in his office and looked at the monitor in front of him with a gratified smile. Mo Hung had tested the parts in the workshop with other people in the research division, but they either thought that they couldn't assemble it completely or could only identify one part of the assembly. However, Silen was able to identify both parts in such a short amount of time. One had to know that the time given to the students for the test was 10 hours. Many of these students were specially recruited students. That was why Mo Hung said that Silen was qualified to be specially recruited at the train station. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.